wrap up this 5-part retrospective as we go into the films of the 2020 decade so far, from 2020 through 2024. And we begin with 2020, the year of the COVID-19 pandemic that had to push the Oscars at least by 2 months. And one of the fewest times I would actually watch the Oscars with the windows open because of the little nice spring temperature that was going on. And of course, one of the embarrassing ceremonies when it comes to at the end, thanks a lot to Steven Soderbergh. And this would also be the last time that it would just be a random number of Best Picture nominees before it goes to the permanent 10, as this year we had our final year with 8. And we begin this up with The Father, one of the 3 debuted features on this list of the picture nominees of this year, which was the directorial debut of Florian Zeller based on his play La Perla, or The Father, of course, which is known in French, which actually did appear on Broadway, of course, with Frank Langella, which he actually won the Tony for Best Actor in a Play. And this movie kind of followed the suit with Anthony Hopkins winning Best Actor, beating the late Chadwick Boseman, and it also took up the win for Adapted Screenplay, beating our Best Picture winner. I am putting this one in C. I do get the whole premise of, obviously, of the whole perspective from somebody that is dealing with dementia, of course, with Hopkins' character. Unfortunately, I don't know anyone personally in my personal life that has suffered through dementia or Alzheimer's, so I can't really have that personal experience that I know many of people have with somebody in their real life. Um, I do get the direction status, what Florian Zeller did. This is really evident on, like, with not just his direction, but also with the editing, the production design, which I can see why it was up there, and with some of the performances, mainly with Olivia Colman. But my issue with the movie is that the dialogue just doesn't work for me. I don't know if it's like the whole British skew somewhat, because I know that Christopher Hampton co-wrote the script with Florian Zeller. So I don't know if it's like there's a lot of British terminology or something I'm missing, or like British conversations to be precise. So it does leave me a bit confusion. I get the premise, it's just I just think the dialogue just doesn't work for me, honestly. Like, if it was more clear, not saying like in an American terminology, but like in all forms of the English terminology, like not just for the US, but also for the British, the Irish, the Canadians, and the Australians, or New Zealand's, or any other country that primarily has English, that we can all have something that has more of a connection, that we can all understand the dialogue. So yeah, I know a lot of people really do feel connected with this movie, and like, if it wasn't for a year like that, like 2020, if the pandemic didn't happen, I don't think this movie would have been as big as everyone thought, other than just Hopkins' performance. But this is without a doubt Sony Pictures Classic's best performance at the Oscars for a movie in recent years, because the fact that it got in picture, it obviously got 2 acting nominations, one of them being a win, and it won screenplay. It just like with another one of our movies that we'll get into later with this decade, King Richard, the movie came along with it. So, yeah, so the movie itself kind of joined along with the party, and it ended up for the benefit of both Florian Zeller, Anthony Hopkins, and Sony Pictures Classics. For me, I would have given my Best Actor vote to Chadwick Boseman. I mean, that performance was very memorable, although it was just poorly executed how the show built it up. Way to go, Steven Soderbergh. Next up, Judas and the Black Messiah, which kind of is giving like the Hidden Figures vibes, where it did better as it got into the later half of the awards. But obviously, the massive difference was it got a lot more other categories other than Hidden Figures. Like, it obviously got in for picture, it got supporting actor for Daniel Kaluuya, original screenplay, but it got cinematography, original song, which that was kind of expected, and even the most oddest category fraudulent placements, with Lakeith Stanfield getting in for supporting actor in his lead performance. Or should I say, both him and Kaluuya are the leads in Judas and the Black Messiah. So yeah, is this like the first 3 winners, I believe, of this decade? Yeah, 3 winners of this decade of a lead performance winning in supporting. Yep. That's kind of ridiculous to say the least, but I really love this movie. This was actually my first of the picture nominees in this specific order because this was like the least likely to win because of the last late Best Picture resurgence, and like Shaka King didn't get in for director, which almost happened. Dominic Fishback didn't get in for supporting actress or film editing, but yeah, this really is a great double feature with another one of our picture nominees because they, oddly enough, take place around the same time. We'll get to that one at the end. This is going into an S tier. I mean, the fact that this movie kind of is like showing I forget what Stanfield's character is because I know Fred Hampton is Kaluuya's character. I think it's William or something like that. That's Stanfield's real life, the real person that Stanfield's playing. Yeah, and I keep forgetting Jesse Plemons is in this, but like doing an undercover, being like an undercover member of the Black Panther Party, so that the police can go and figure out about this Fred Hampton person. And speaking of Kaluuya, he gave the best performance in 2020. Although he won supporting, he would have been my personal winner in the best actor category over Chadwick Boseman. Like if Kaluuya did went leading along with Stanfield, there could have been a possibility Kaluuya might have still would have won. But yeah, especially the "I'm a Revolutionary" speech, probably my favorite scene in the entire movie. That definitely probably explains why Kaluuya gave the best performance in 2020. I'm glad he got an Oscar, but it was for the wrong category, and it didn't even pick up an additional win for original song, beating Leslie Odom Jr.'s song "Speak Now" from One Night in Miami and Diane Warren's song "You'll Scene from the Life Ahead." So yeah, it's interesting that three of those songs all took one award each. Il Scene took the Globe, Speak Now took Critics' Choice, and Fight for You took the Oscar with her, who for at least 1 year became the youngest winner in that category until Billie Eilish broke that a year later. Fantastic movie, and although some people might put it as a 2021 movie, but I'm going to go based on obviously this Oscar calendar year, I'm going to say it's a 2020 film. Now into our most nominated film from Netflix, Mank, which earned more Oscar wins than Citizen Kane, of course, with 2 for production design and an upset win in cinematography, even though it did win the Guild. I am giving this one a C. It is fine. It obviously I would say the first hour or half hour or so, or like the first 30 minutes, it does take a lot of its time because it's just basically like Mank just being in his bedroom with his maid with them, of course played by Lily Collins. But once, like, I think it's Sharon Davis or Marin Davis, I believe. Amanda Seyfried's character, I forget what it is. I think it's Marin Davis. When she gets into the picture, that's when the movie starts to get better as it goes on, especially with her Mankiewicz's development of trying to write the script for Citizen Kane. Gary Oldman is actually has a great performance. I think his best nomination out of the 3 acting nominations in his career, obviously more so than Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy or Darkest Hour. Amanda Seyfried definitely should have won Best Supporting Actress, and she would have been the only Oscar nominee in that lineup that would be in my personal lineup in general. So, yeah, nerds. The costumes are pretty good. The sound design was pretty good. I'm surprised that was overlooked. This would have been my pick, I would say, for original score. I would say, because I think it had more of a standout score than Soul did. Even though Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross both did those films, with John Batiste doing the score as well for Soul. So, yeah. Cinematography, there are some good moments with the black and white, but I probably would have given that to Nomadland, our Best Picture winner. So, we'll get to that in about a few minutes. So, yeah, it's a fine movie. I wouldn't mind if I get it if the movie ever appears on the Criterion Collection. Although it is an interesting history with David Fincher with Blu-ray releases. If you have known, like especially the elusive, unique Criterion Blu-ray for Benjamin Button, and obviously with Gone Girl, The Social Network, and some of his other films. Even though, specifically more of his recent films from the Benjamin Button onwards. But we have yet to see this film or The Killer have a physical media release. Now into our non-English film nominee of the year, Minari, which of course was won for Best Supporting Actress for Yoo Jun Young, which became the 4th performance in a non-English film to win an Oscar. The other three being Sophia Loren and Two Women back in the 60s. And then you had Roberto Benigni in Life is Beautiful back in 98, and then Marion Cotillard and Le'Veon Rose in 2007. And although this is a primarily American production, Minari is technically a non-English film because there's a lot more Korean in it than it is in English, and sometimes even both languages in one sentence if you have seen the film. I'm giving this one a D. It is just basically the simple like this Korean family just moving into a new country and working in the farmlands and just getting through the life, and then their grandma comes and there's some issues that she has. It's just basically a movie about life, and that's kind of it. I don't know if it's loosely based on Lee Isaac Chun's lifetime, but there's just really nothing for me in this movie. Nothing really stands out other than like just the nature aspect, I would say. Not really in a beautiful manner. It just it's just life, I would say. There's just like nothing going on, I would say. Just the typical family life. So yeah, Yoo Jun Yun, like I said, Amanda Seyfried would have been my personal pick in supporting actress. I would have put Steven Yeun in supporting because I think Minari is an ensemble piece and there's no clear lead in the film. I know a lot of people were expecting, including me, thinking that Alan Kim was going to get nominated at the last minute for supporting actor. Not because of his emotional speech he gave when he won Young Actor or Actress at Critics' Choice, but the BAFTA nomination that he got, even though that was a jury voting category at the time. But that would have been a possibility for having something. But as we have seen, as I kind of talked about, the actress branch are not really a fan of going with male child actors, except for, obviously, I mentioned Justin Henry, but I also forgot about Haley Joel Osment in The Sixth Sense. So yeah, those are the only two notable ones they really do recognize. But they really kind of overlooked. They didn't even recognize the girl the one who plays the daughter in Minari, who is like the big sister to Alan Kim's character. Um, but she didn't have a lot of screen time either. So, yeah, this movie was not really something for me. This was not probably I would say one of the weaker A24 nominees, even though it's way better than Lady Bird, obviously, as you can tell. It just is very forgetful for me. Into the nature aspect, I would say, let's go into our Best Picture winner, Nomadland. I think our first film since 12 Years a Slave to sweep all the Best Picture wins. Even though I know 12 Years a Slave and Gravity did tie to the Producers Guild, but Nomadland was the film to beat at both film festivals, at Critics Awards, and in the Televised Industry Awards. I'm giving this one, yeah, I'm gonna give it a B. It is real, definitely well in a technical aspect, really well shot, well edited. And there are some good writing in this film from Chloe Zhao. Um, it's just that I think the direction wasn't really much of a standout compared to her writing and editing in the film. And obviously, the reason why she obviously was going to win this regardless, and having a woman as the front runner to win the Best Director category is obviously like kind of like Moonlight, where Nomadland's the big middle finger to the hashtag Oscars so male controversy, where Moonlight was for the Oscars so white controversy. Because obviously, with the previous year, with Gerwig not getting in or any other woman getting in for director the previous year, and with this having the first year having two females up for director, obviously, and Chloe Zhao becoming the first woman of color to win this category. And I'm surprised she didn't get any major backlash from like radical right wing media because she's from China, but she is opposed to her own country's government, so that is very understandable. Frances McDormand, I did not think she needed to win that third Oscar for Best Actress, even though that was like one of the most intense Best Actor races I think in recent years. And like because there were four candidates and maybe five, like all five of them had a shot of winning, even though Vanessa Kirby was the least likely to win, even though I did make the weird prediction of predicting her to win the Oscar just for the fun of it. Obviously, that did not happen. So, yeah, McDormand did not really need to win that Oscar for Best Actress. I mean, she already got the producing win for Nomadland for Best Picture, so she didn't really need to get a second one that night. Like, if she would have been up again, it would have been for the tragedy of Macbeth the following year and not for Nomadland. But, like, I think she even kind of did a bit of her Macbeth dialogue in her Oscar speech for Best Actress. But it was kind of a shorter one, obviously, because she kind of did most of her speech in the Best Picture category. Yeah, I do like it. It would, obviously, would have been in my top 10, of course, in the my personal lineup, but it would, like, be I believe it's at number 8 that I did in that ranking. So yeah, so it would be on the list, but it's just because there's like not really a lot of great movies, obviously, that came out, obviously because of the pandemic. Yeah, David Strathairn should have been nominated for supporting actor. He was the true MVP of the cast. I think he should have gotten in there. I will say who I would have gone with for picture, director, and actress here. I do think Nomadland should have won 3, but it would have been the other 3 it would have been up for cinematography, film editing, and adapted screenplay. So, yeah, Chloe Zhao almost could have won 4 Oscars in one night in that decade for Nomadland, but somebody else had kind of already did that right at the end of the first half. Since, like Sean Baker, Zhao was up for producing, directing, writing, and editing the film, but she only won half of it, while Sean Baker took all 4. Here's our other female-directed movie of the year that also got in director, Promising Young Woman, Emerald Fennell's debut feature. And I think what is also noticeable about this film is not because of also she was also acting in The Crown around the same time, but she was also pregnant while she was making this movie. And the movie did win for Best Original Screenplay, and I think probably was number 2 for Best Picture, because other than Nomadland, it was the only other movie that got in the 4 major categories you need to be at least a top 5 candidate for Best Picture. Directing, writing, film editing, and acting, which of course got in for Best Actress for Carey Mulligan. I am giving this one an A. Almost made it an S. It's just that some of the supporting performances in that movie are not really that memorable. But let's just tell you about Fennell's direction. Oh my gosh, she really went into this and really made this a unique, I would say, kind of a suspense thriller, I would say, with Cassie's character of just really getting revenge on almost every male that hazing acts, that obviously that cost her best friend's life. And she wants to get revenge on anyone who was involved with it. Now, like Parasite, this is a movie you couldn't really spoil when the movie came out. And not because of the twist at the end, but the twist before it. Because, like, that's what somebody said. If you called it, then you're not going to like the movie. But if you didn't, like I did, you're going to really take to it. And Fennell really directed this well and keeping that twist really kind of out of nowhere of where it came from. And I was hoping what happened the other twist at the end, I hope that was not a joke. And that was just like it was a massive faking, but nope, it ended up actually happening. So yeah, Fennell definitely should have won Best Director in my opinion, and Carey Mulligan should have won Best Actress. She only got Critics' Choice that year, but kind of like with The Father, this movie also premiered at Sundance, and there wasn't really much buzz because I think it was supposed to come out, I believe, in March or April originally, and then it got pushed all the way back to December, which really helped the benefit for this movie, I would say, because for a while it was just Mulligan's performance that was kind of being the buzz a little bit about, and then like The Father, the movie came along with it, and like The Father, it ended up winning an Oscar for its screenplay for Emerald Fennell. Although my personal pick would have been for Judas and the Black Messiah, which I forgot to mention, that would have been my pick for original screenplay, because I think her direction was more of a standout compared to her writing in the film, since it was, I think, more of a directing and acting showcased. Even though the story still would have been in my personal lineup, but it just wouldn't be the winner for that. So yeah, it should have, like, I'm glad Fennell won for an Oscar, but it should have been for directing, and Mulligan should have taken the Best Actress prize. Next up is Sound of Metal, which is my least favorite of the Best Picture nominees, but it is kind of like Minari gonna go in D as well. So yeah, it wasn't really like my bottom 3, the ones I really didn't took much to the most, like The Father or um, Mank maybe, and then obviously with Once Upon a Time in Home, Minari and this film. They're fine as it is, or just kind of disappointments or something like that. It's just like they're not that memorable to be precise, but when it comes to Sound of Metal being my least favorite of the picture nominees, I just don't think that the whole like it would be very interesting to talk about something about the deaf community, because when we go into next year with our Best Picture winner, it would be very odd to talk about it. It obviously did one for sound specifically, yeah, because they combined it now. That's very odd title. And film editing. I was thinking I was gonna go more into like a Whiplash scenario where it kind of goes a little bit more in the drumming aspect for our deaf drummer, which is of course played by Riz Ahmed here, and and then obviously with Paul Raci almost kind of like being like somewhat this person to help him get through this. But it's just his character as this like instructor of this like obviously this deaf community center. It just he's trying to get our main character to not break any rules and just follow to actually legit become deaf for his entire life and just not be able to hear anymore. And obviously he kind of doesn't follow those regulations, of course. But one thing I would say about what is the best thing about this movie is easily Olivia Cooke, as Ahmed's girlfriend in this movie, who only appears at the beginning and nearing the end of the movie, and it's one of the best small performances because this character has a massive transition that we don't know off screen, and it's still the same character, but just like she kind of learns something from her boyfriend, and just like and also a little bit of a transition she went from kind of like from this massive heavy metal to like something more soft and calmer. Um, and it's like it's still the same person, but it's just going into a completely different direction. And it's just the credit for her performance is easily fantastic on that. So yeah, this is my least favorite of the picture nominees, but obviously is not like one of the worst least favorite of the category. Like if I would rank all my least favorite picture nominees in these respective years, I think this might be right at the bottom. Like not the worst one, but even like the highest, like the least likely out of my least favorite picture nominees each year. And then we come into my personal pick for Best Picture, and the only picture nominee of 2020 to go home empty handed, The Trial of the Chicago 7. I am putting this one in S. And obviously, I kind of mentioned that this would go as a perfect double feature with Judas and the Black Messiah, because both movies do take place around the exact same times, with Judas and the Black Messiah's events kind of going in the middle of Chicago 7. This movie is fantastic. It is a shame this movie went home empty-handed. Like, I would like a lot of people assumed it would have become the first film for Grand Hotel since Grand Hotel to win Best Picture and nothing else. And it would kind of show the continued strategy that you would not need to get a Best Director nomination to win Best Picture, as Argo and Green Book were not done long ago, and we would see next year's Best Picture winner. But that didn't happen. Some people thought it could have been for film editing, but I knew Sound of Metal was going to be the likely one. Yeah, it is a shame the movie went home empty-handed. It probably I think it would have been my only vote I would have given it to would have been for Best Picture, oddly enough, because I think Aaron Sorkin's direction was more of a standout compared to his writing, and like he would have been definitely should have been in for Best Director. And there is a great list of actors in this movie that should have been up in the supporting categories, like Yalp Abdul-Mateen III, Frank Langella, Mark Rylance, and my MVP in the cast, Eddie Redmayne, who was fantastic in this film. Definitely a nomination that was very overlooked, but they went with Sacha Baron Cohen, not because he would, obviously with his character kind of having the standout scene in the court, but also he had a big year he had with that and Borat's subsequent movie film. Delivery of Berditchik bribed to American regime for make benefits once glorious nation of Kazakhstan. Yeah, so he had a year he had, but it is a shame this movie did not win home empty-handed. I really wish this movie should be released on Blu-ray. I mean, Netflix has some films in Criterion, so hopefully this one will come in pretty soon. But yeah, but I'm glad it got a massive win this season at the Screen Actors Guild Award for Best Ensemble, which is very understandable. 2021, we returned back to 10. No more random 8 or 9 nominations. 10 from now on. And we are going to begin this up with Belfast, from Kenneth Branagh's semi-autobiographical movie, which got the buzz ever since it won the People's Choice Award at TIFF, and got Branagh his first Oscar in original screenplay. I'm putting this one in D. I was really thinking, when I was going in blind with this movie, I was thinking, okay, is it going to be like what we see later on with The Fabelmans? Would this be kind of like Branagh's origins of how he would get into the use of movie making? But instead, it's kind of more about his childhood, specifically during, like obviously, yeah, I knew it was about his childhood, but I thinking there going to be a lot of film influence in his life as a child. But instead, it's primarily specifically during the period of the Catholic Church versus the Protestant Church in Ireland. There was a massive war between the two religions in that country, And what Buddy is witnessing was not really specifically the conflict between the two religions, but like the situation his parents were going through, especially his father during his lifetime, and how he was still trying to go through this normal life with everything he's doing, like the relationship with his grandparents and a childhood crush he has in school, which definitely really would have been a lot better use for the movie. But I knew that they were not forcing the romance plot in this movie, otherwise it would have been kind of bland for the movie to go to. Other things like in Lifetime, like you just don't really understand, like Buddy obviously does not understand specifically where his parents and the whole situation his town's going through with the whole religious thing, because it's not really like, it's kind of the sentient focus of the film, but it's not really much about the film itself, like specifically about that in the film. It's just about Buddy's lifetime during this period. Yeah, I wouldn't give this original screenplay. I don't think it really did not needed to win that award. Kieran Hines, I actually do agree with getting in, and I do think he was the best thing about the movie, other than the little romance plot and Judi Dench, actually, because yeah, if you went in this movie blind and did not like Balf's character, who plays obviously Buddy's mom, Katrina Balfe specifically, yeah, I might agree with the Academy that Judi Dench was probably the better one, because she does give one of the more lighthearted moments, as well as Hines' character as well. Ironically, there was supposed to be an alternate ending where Buddy comes back home as an adult, who would be played by Brana, back home in Belfast, and just wandering in the streets again, and even seeing one of his old neighbors or stuff like that, or just like somebody who knew Buddy as a child, and just seeing where he is at now. And then him and all the main cast members in a colored shot would all walk down in the Belfast Isle, like in one of the Belfast streets specifically, not an aisle, I mean. But I do think that would have been a better ending than the ending we got in the final film. The black and white is fine. There are some good moments with it, but it just like maybe it should have been in color. Um, like the sound design, I can understand with the whole riot scenes, but no. Personally, I think it. Okay, maybe I can't really say because I have not seen Four Good Days. I do love this Van Morrison song "Down to Joy," which took a while for that song to get released on iTunes. Because the Belfast movie soundtrack wasn't available, but now that song's now available on Van Morrison's recently new album, I believe. Yeah, it is probably in his new album. So that finally got released on iTunes, and now I finally have it on my iTunes. So that's definitely great to hear. Definitely a great song nomination. And if you remember my nomination reaction, I was so happy it got in because it was the best song out of the ones on the short list, out of context in the movie, but it still works right in context as well, even though it's just in the opening credits. Now into the big Best Picture winner that didn't took the most Oscars, but it was the main winner. Coda, the first streaming service movie to win Best Picture, the second remake to win Best Picture after The Departed, as this was a remake of the French film La Femme Belle, or The Bel-Air Family, from 2014, and is the first film since The Lord of the Rings The Return of the King to win all the Oscars it was nominated for. Granted, it was only three, of course, because it obviously won for picture, supporting actor for Troy Kotzer, and adapted screenplay for the film's director Sean Hayter. I am giving this one a B. It is definitely. Oh, not that one. Yeah, there it is, right there. I almost made the mistake, but it would be a very high B, like a B plus or something like that. Um, I really do like this movie. I actually did watch the original French film prior to it on my Oscar movie marathon, and I actually really did like it. Although I do understand it might be controversial now with the casting choice of having the three deaf characters of the parents and the brother actually not being deaf in real life. When in this movie, obviously in the remake, it does, not just with Troy Kotzer and Marley Madeline, but I forgot who the I think his name was Patrick, I believe. The actor, I believe, who plays obviously Amelia Jones's brother in the movie. All three of them are deaf in real life. There are a lot of great moments that I do really understand why this does make sense being a remake. Is obviously you have to make some differences, of course. Like in the original film, I believe it was more about specifically he wants to run for mayor, and then in the in the remake with Katsu as obviously in the father's point, it would be more about the fairness in like the fishing industry and stuff like that. Since this movie kind of does take place in Manchester, and I believe it is the same bar that we saw in Manchester by the Sea would be used in Coda, so that's pretty noticeable, I would say. Amelia Jones is fantastic in this movie, and I, of course, like kind of with Daniel Kaluuya when, obviously, back when I saw Get Out or finding out a little bit more about this actress specifically, obviously I did not know she was British, so that's the reason why it made sense why she got the BAFTA nomination. But yeah, she would have been a great Best Actress nomination, as well as the song Beyond the Shore. Although I was kind of disappointed, I was thinking that song was going to be the song that Amelia's character was going to be auditioning at the end of the movie, as like, oh, was the French music teacher was developing the song as like was the French music teacher using this song for her to audition, like an actual original song made for the movie, of course, and then she would perform it in do sign language. That would have been a great moment. That would have probably made a lot more sense getting in the best original song category. Because that song is fantastic, even though it's unfortunately an end credit song. But plus, Amelia Jones is wonderful at singing, like definitely a great singer. But obviously, she can still act, even doing the sign language as well. Troy Kotzer is fantastic. He definitely deserved the win for Best Supporting Actor, and the only one in the top 8 I do agree with on. I'll tell you what would be my picks for Best Picture and Adapted Screenplay, of course, although they would be nominated as well. I will say my only massive criticism, like obviously, yeah, Marley Madeline, like yeah, as the mother, that is ununderstandable to actually bring somebody with deaf, but I honestly think that's just kind of a no offense, a bland casting choice. You could have gone with another deaf adult actress to play the mother because like you would have like Marley Madeline like as a producer or an executive producer that would have been fine. And Madeline is currently one of the head governors in the actors branch right now. Because they've been really using a lot more sign language, a lot more in recent years with having like a sign language translator sometimes at the red carpet or carpets in some cases, and even doing ASL translation, of course, through the obviously through the Oscars YouTube channels and even a lot of the Oscar live streams they do, except for the luncheons. But like when they do the Oscar weeks events, like they have panels of like each of the feature film nominees or the shorts. There was always be somebody that would do sign language over there, of course, especially since it's been more recent occurrence in a lot of major events. My only critique with the movie itself, other than kind of like the bland casting choice with Madeline or the brother doesn't really have much development. For me, it would be forcing a bit of the romance story that wasn't much in the original film, but it kind of did felt a little bit more forced in the remake per se, especially would come into one of the more consequential moments with the family's life. Even though we do understand it is a teenager and she's fallen in love, and obviously she knows that she can't stay with her family anymore because she wants to try to find a way on her own without like because she really wants her independence with herself, because this is another coming of age story and definitely one of the better ones. It is, I would say, on par with the original film. So, because I think the original film was, the actress was also somebody who, I believe actually competed in the French version of The Voice and ended up becoming the lead star in that original film. I forgot her stage. Her stage name started with Z, I believe, but I know that's not her real name. But it is a great film for both the original and the remake, of course. Definitely, I would say a better. Both of them are better than The Departed, honestly, for terms of a remake of a non-English film. So even though we are going to get one, obviously with Begonia here in about a few months or so, a remake of a Korean movie. So and obviously with the Japanese remakes of Akira Kurosawa's movies with Living and Spike Lee's Highest to Lowest, which will be coming out next month. Now into the most divisive Best Picture nominee, probably of the entire decade for many people. Don't Look Up. Some people would probably put this in F or E or D or C. I'm putting this one in B. I actually really did like it. Not as much as Vice, but definitely way better than The Big Short. I can see why a lot of people are not really taking to the movie, because there is definitely a lot of some overestimating things, like the editing, of course, is obviously the big evidence of just the over-exaggerated comedy that McKay would have done, like with The Big Short and Vice as well, even though Vice is not really much of a comedy. And obviously the whole, like, oh, it's the end of the world scenario story, of course, and obviously with a little bit more evident. And yeah, the post credit scene, yeah, what the fuck was those creatures? Ugh. And the ending was just very odd. But I would say there are some fantastic performances in this movie that I'm surprised this movie got no acting nominations whatsoever. I mean, DiCaprio was great. I think this was probably my favorite DiCaprio, one of my favorite DiCaprio performances of this decade. We'll get to the other one here nearing the end of the retrospective. Um, did Jennifer Lawrence definitely shouldn't have been up for Best Actress. That's definitely, I would say, her best performance. I would say for me that I have seen from her since Winter's Bone. It's definitely her best one, and she was pretty good in Causeway, but definitely her best one, I think, in recent years. Meryl Streep, I'm surprised she was overlooked for Best Supporting Actress because this is kind of like her own satirization of Trump specifically, because that's basically what her character is. Because the president is I believe a radical Republican, and like a Trump style Republican specifically in your views in the movie, which I can see why some Trump supporters probably would hate this movie because Streep is one of Trump's biggest critics. I think this definitely would have been a great nomination for her, especially since she had not been nominated for a while, and well, The Post is still her last nomination to date. And then for the supporting cast, it's kind of hit or miss. Rob Morgan's pretty good in a small part, although we don't see him much. Kid Cudi and Ariana Grande, just typical pop star casting, pop star playing pop stars. That's just not that very creative. Jonah Hill, very annoying in this one. Same thing with Mark Rylance, even though that character almost would have said, would it help? Ron Perlman is very hilarious in his one part, especially in his last scene we seen him. And Kate Blanchett and Tyler Perry as the news reporters. That was a pretty unique duo. And Blanchett obviously had a better performance in this than obviously when we get to Nightmare Alley. And she was actually longlisted for BAFTA for Don't Look Up and not Nightmare Alley, even though you are allowed to be double nominated for leading or double nominated for supporting at the BAFTA. Same thing with the Golden Globes, but you can't do it at like Critics' Choice, SAG, or the Oscars. So that's very odd. Yeah, so it's kind of a hit or miss with the cast, I would say. There are some great performances, and there are some not so good performances, and some bland casting choices. Oh, I forgot Timothy Chalamet is also in this one. I also do like the whole dinner scene at the end with like some of the characters, obviously with DiCaprio with his family, and then Lawrence and Chalamet and Morgan as well, Rob Morgan specifically. So that was kind of a nice last moment they would all have together. It's like this massive dinner they would have in this conversation before the world would come to an end. Obviously, it did not make it into any of my other personal lineups, like for original screenplay or best picture, but it probably would have been on the edge for those. But definitely, it should have gotten some acting nominations, especially for both the leads with DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence. And the tradition has been continuing on ever since Parasite won Best Picture. It's almost now automatically you have to put at least one non-English film on this list. And that's the case with Drive My Car from Ryusuke Hamaguchi, the first Japanese film to receive a Best Picture nomination here at the Oscars. Because you would have thought any of the films from Akira Kurosawa, especially Ron back in the 80s, would have made it, especially with Ron because it got 6 nominations, including Kurosawa for director, but didn't make it into the picture lineup. Japan didn't even submitted that film for the foreign language film category, now international feature category, and now this film has done it, obviously winning international feature, but it also got in for directing and adapted screenplay. I am giving this one, I am giving this a B. I don't know what it is for me, but for some reason, the movie I almost compared this to a bit is specifically for with Finding Nemo. The reason I mentioned Finding Nemo is that if you take the prologue scene in Finding Nemo and you expand that to 45 minutes, because you have to understand with our main character played by Hidetoshi Nishimi where he would be at when we get to the main portion of the movie, because he would unfortunately would lose his wife. And you have to understand the entire synopsis throughout the 45 minutes of what has happened to his wife throughout the 45 minutes, and you understand where his character would be at throughout the remainder of the movie, especially just playing, obviously, just speaking all the Uncle Vanya dialogue in his car with the audio cassette that is actually voiced by his own wife. Even with Toko Maru, who plays the main driver, who also has a unique backstory that obviously has something tragic in her life that both she and him have a massive connection to, even though not really personally, but something that both have tragic family lives, that something does happen. And yeah, both of them are fantastic. And if the movie would have got a little bit more of a later resurgence, it would have both of them got in the acting categories. Kind of like with Coda, which I forgot to mention. Like if Coda did got a later release date, Sean Hayter would have been in directing. Marley Madeline probably would have been supporting actress just because of who she is. Emilia Jones would have got in for actress. It would have got in for film editing and original song for Beyond the Shore. Like with Coda, if Drive My Car got a bit of more later, it would have gotten in the acting categories and especially film editing. I mean, the 3 hours works so well. I mean, watching that on my television in my room, obviously with almost my room kind of being dark, I would say, because I had the curtains closed, especially during because of the sun, but also during the winter season usually. But just seeing, watching that movie in its 3 hour length, it didn't really get boredom. It's just like you really go through with the performances and the way how Hamaguchi directed and he and Takamasa Oda wrote the script. Yeah, Drive My Car definitely deserved the win for international feature in one of the probably the best international feature lineup in that year because I really did like all 5 of those nominations and the best winner in that category of this decade so far. Even though Another Round is definitely a close second. Again, but Drive My Car should have also won the other two categories it would have been up for, other than Best Picture, Adapted Screenplay, and Best Director. So yeah, and also this is definitely a movie I would say for those in the theater industry to watch, because obviously this is kind of an Uncle Vanya. Um, Obviously because the characters are obviously doing the stage adaptation of Uncle Vanya, and obviously with me watching the '90 movie from Louis Malle, Vanya on 42nd Street, that obviously features Wallace Shawn and Andre Gregory, the iconic duo, and even Julianne Moore. If you had seen that movie, you will understand a lot of this more so in Drive My Car. So, if you're familiar with the Uncle Vanya play, you're gonna really love Drive My Car. So, even though that's not really the main plot, but it's kind of like with Belfast, where you have the Protestant versus the Catholic Church being the sentient point, the centerpiece throughout the main plot. The Uncle Vanya play is kind of like the centerpiece throughout the main plot, or main setting, I would specifically say. Next up, our most winning film, Dune, which got 10 nominations, one big in the technical categories, but the director's branch overlooked Denis Villeneuve for Best Director, the big snub of that year. Because they had to, of course, go with Steven Spielberg, and I'll get to his adaptation of West Side Story here, but yeah, Dune, I mean, it was a fantastic movie when I saw it. And I actually did have to rewatch the first Dune because it had been like 3 years since I've seen it in preparation for Dune Part 2. And I really still did enjoy it. I am going to give this an A, not S, but it is going to be an A. Um, the whole world building aspect is definitely what makes me kind of coming back into the world of Dune and understanding where Paul was coming from being this young prince to almost finding a secret origin that is coming into him. Even though that would of course be more exploration when we get to Dune Part 2. But Denis Villeneuve really took the world with us by storm with this direction. Although he would not be my winner in that year, but he would have been in my best director lineup personally. I am glad it got the adapted screenplay nomination because everyone thought that was not going to happen, and it ended up becoming more of a true thing. Not because of the WGA or Critics' Choice nomination, it was the BAFTA nomination that really told us Dune was a thing in the adapted screenplay category, especially since Eric Roth was one of the writers. Timothy Chalamet is actually fantastic in this movie, and then although it didn't she wasn't in my list when I did the video, but now after my revisit on the first Dune, Rebecca Ferguson is so great in this movie specifically. And this is definitely like one of the unique best mother-son duo movies. Like unlike a lot of other movies, this one obviously since it's kind of more of a sci-fi suspense thrilling action thriller or something like that, fantasy levels. It's just like the way how both of them have to deal with the survivalness from the enemies is just very intense, I would say. And the whole journey they have to go from point A to point B and to where they are at right now with obviously with Javier Bardem and Zendaya's characters. I would mention something about Zendaya, but I will talk a little bit more about that when we get to Dune Part 2. I'm very happy it won a lot of Oscars. Sound definitely. Can't really say on visual effects or costume design or makeup because I've not seen like some of the films like Cruella or Cyrano or Shang-Chi or Free Guy. Original score, I'm very happy Hans Zimmer got his second Oscar, but obviously he didn't intend it because of how ABC was trying to get the ratings and just cutting off the category just because they want to bring us some massive cringe-worthy moments from three of the worst hosting decisions, I think, in the Oscars history. I mean, seriously, what the fuck were they thinking? Wanda Sykes and Regina Hall, I was skeptical, but when they said Amy Schumer was going to host, I was like, fuck no. And just like, I knew that show was going to go turn down to shit, and that was. So, it would have been better if all categories were presented, but decided to kick out categories for film editing that was not important, although original song ABC thinks was more important, even though it was not. Um, yeah, Hans Zimmer decided to have a ceremony at the Hollywood Bowl and did a unique acceptance speech he did at that Bowl theater during that same night at the Oscars when he found out he won his second Oscar after The Lion King. So, and then of course he would be ruled ineligible for Doom Part 2 for some fucking reason. Next up is my personal pick for Best Picture, and the movie that no one wants to watch, not because of the win specifically, but because of what happened prior to his win. King Richard, the biopic on Richard Williams, not the animation director, by the way, not the animator who was behind Who Framed Roger Rabbit or The Thief and the Cobbler. This is Richard Williams, the father of Serena and Venus Williams. Now, if this movie would have been the perspective of both of the girls instead of the father, I think this movie would have not worked. But since it is focused on the perspective of the main father of the girls, I am going to give this an A. I mean, and also the whole aspect of family really kind of does well. Now I know what you're thinking. What are my thoughts about Will Smith's performance? He is good, but it's just odd that I would say he might be the weakest out of some of the main cast members because a lot of the supporting performances stood him out more so, especially Ingenue Ellis, who would have been my personal pick for supporting actress. I forgot I think it's Sydney Sweeney? Or no, I think I'm not mistaken. I think her first name is Sydney or something like that. Who plays one of the Williams sisters who does playing in the massive climax, which that climax tennis match was fantastic. As well as John Bernthal, and Tony Goldwyn. Goldwyn, I think, was a lot better than Bernthal. The other Williams sisters, they had a lot more of a standout. And it was really going well so, too, when they were in the California area. But I would say the pacing kind of does go a little bit slow once they get to Florida, but it really comes back when it comes to the climax. Yeah, it also should have won for original screenplay for Zach Baylin because of the whole family message. It really comes into fruition. And also having the perspective being the main father. For me, my personal best actor pick would have been Denzel Washington in The Tragedy of Macbeth. Will Smith would have been he would have been number 3 behind Benedict Cumberbatch, but in front of Javier Bardem and being the Ricardos and Andrew Garfield and Tick Tick Boom, but would have not have made it in my personal best actor list. He would have been my number 7 because Chalamet in Dune would have been ahead of him. As the 5 that I had in my lineup would have been Denzel, Cumberbatch, Daniel Craig in No Time to Die, my personal winner in that, Hidetoshi Najimi, and DiCaprio in Don't Look Up. So, yeah, with Daniel Craig being the winner, as I just mentioned. So, yeah, Will Smith would have been, if there were 10 nominees in Best Actor, for me, my personal lineup, he would have made it. It's just that he would have been number 3rd in terms of my ranking of all the Best Actor nominees because a lot of the supporting cast kind of stood him out more so. But he would have walked away with the Best Picture winner with King Richard being my personal pick since he did produce the film. I would just like to mention it's a shame that Ronaldo Marcus Green was overlooked this entire season as he was the only director of the year that got no nominations because he only just directed the film and that was it. He didn't produce it, he didn't wrote the film, he just directed the film. And the way how he directed all the scenes in California and the climax match, that really definitely showed him he should have been up for Best Director. Especially with the movie getting in for film editing at the Oscars, he probably would have been on the outskirts, same thing with Sean Hayter for Best Director. Next up is Paul Thomas Anderson's Licorice Pizza, which marked the film debuts of both Alana Haim of the sister band Haim and Cooper Hoffman, the son of Philip Seymour Hoffman. And one of the most notable movies in recent years of this old woman, young man relationship status. Now, I know that kind of the age difference did spark a little bit of controversy, of course, because obviously with the casting choice of having, not also with the story having specifically a 15-year-old and a 25-year-old girl's relationship, but obviously in real life they're also 10 years difference because I believe Haim was 30 and Cooper was 20 when the movie came out, if I'm not mistaken. But they were 10 years difference in real life as well. Um, but it's just like you don't usually see that in a lot of movies nowadays. But you've seen a lot of old man, young woman relationship status in movies nowadays, especially in a lot of the early years and even some of the Bond films where he makes out with younger women. Especially, I would say it's kind of odd with casting choices, especially ever since the Me Too movement. So, yeah, you don't usually see a lot of young men, older woman relationship status in movies. I know No Hard Feelings was 2 years ago, but then you have like something like if you go back in the past, like The Graduate or like Harold and Maude or The Piano Teacher, and some other noteworthy examples of other films that I don't think none of these other films here have this old woman young men relationship status. Yeah, I don't see that in any of the other picture nominees here. So like this is probably the only notable one I think of this century so far to do so, and it is definitely one of the positivity ones. And it is has like two semi autobiographical things in PTA's life that he witnessed. Well, one of them is kind of a semi autobiographical of some person who sold a lot of waterbeds, which they called soggy bottoms, which that was actually the original title for licorice pizza. And then like because one of the guy who sold all the young man who sold all the water bottles sold one to John Peters, which is Bradley Cooper's character. And honestly, that's what I was thinking the movie was when I saw the trailer. When I was going into this movie, I was thinking the movie was about this film school that John Peters was running, and it would have been about this teenage boy in the summer camp that specifically falls in love with this older girl in their 20s, and they really get along with all the crazy film shenanigans they would do. But that's not what it is, actually. And obviously, the other life with the romance line, because PTA witnessed some time in his high school of one of his classmates flirting with one of the older women who was 25, so who was one of the photo assistants, so because it was school picture day. So yeah, so two semi-autobiographical things, but combining them into one. One thing I don't like much about Licorice Pizza, and I forgot to mention, I have to put this in. I'm gonna put this in. I'm putting this in B as well. One thing is I don't like the most is that it kind of does repeat three times where Alana and Gary, Cooper Hopkins' character, comes together, then they're apart, comes back together, comes apart, comes back together. Like they kind of go apart in a sour way, and then they somehow come back together. It's kind of a very repetitive status, I would say. Alana Haim is actually pretty fantastic for her debut feature. Like, it does show like Tim McGraw in The Blind Side, where music artists can do acting as well. And that was a pretty great debut feature, as well as Cooper Hoffman as Gary. Although he wouldn't be in my personal actor lineup, he would be a little bit lower. It's just Haim was clearly the MVP of the cast. I really wish there was a lot more scenes with John Peters in this movie with Cooper, because if that would have been a great supporting acting nomination. Speaking of Bradley Cooper, here is Guillermo del Toro's Nightmare Alley, the second film adaptation of this novel. The first was I believe was 47, 40, or 46, that film, which is obviously, this is not a remake to that film, as this was an adaptation to the novel, so I've not seen that original 40s film yet, even though that 40s film is available on Criterion, and very oddly enough, Del Toro's adaptation was just announced in the Criterion collection on this July 18th recording, as it was announced 3 days ago. Okay, so I was really looking forward to Nightmare Alley, obviously, because I have been a massive fan with Del Toro's. Excuse me for the calendar. I was just trying to look at the date there. I was really looking forward to it because I loved Nightmare Alley. The first hour was great, but as soon as Bradley Cooper and Rooney Mara's characters leave the carnival and were introduced to Cate Blanchett's character, that's when the movie went downhill. And with that, I have to give this a D, just because the first hour is fantastic, but the rest of the movie just went downhill. If Blanchett's character was not introduced, then I think this would have been a way much better movie. Now, I have not known if this is also similar to the original first film adaptation. If it is, hopefully it's way better than Del Toro's adaptation, but I mean, that first hour was so fantastic, is that I just want to go back to watch that first hour. And if that first hour was just the entire movie, that would have been the greatest just as a short film. And that would have been fantastic short from him, but yep, it's just only the first hour I really liked. I really wish there was more to it. And now we come into The Power of the Dog, which is almost like another version of Brokeback Mountain, where it does focus on like a gay cowboy, of course, even though I kind of almost spoiled that movie. But if you went to this entire movie, it would have been a spoiler from beginning to end. But since this movie is a bit older, you kind of now know the whole synopsis. Sorry about the additional screen again. I am gonna give The Power of the Dog a B as well. I really do like the whole chapter structure it does give. Um, this is kind of almost similar, I would say, to The Worst Person in the World as well, which also did a chapter structure. But I think for The Power of the Dog, I think it was only like the first chapter and the last chapter I did not like. All the other chapters, from chapters 2 through, I think it's 9. I forget how many. No, I think it's chapters 1, 2, and 3 in this film. Like, I'm getting kind of confused with The Worst Person in the World's chapter structure. But there is, like, I think the beginning portion and somewhere in the end portion I didn't like, but the rest of the movie I really didn't enjoy too. And I kind of mentioned, like, this would be another version of Brokeback Mountain, where it's another movie that involves around gay cowboys but does not win Best Picture. But Jane Campion did walk away with Best Director, the third woman to win that, and it was the only win The Power of the Dog did, because a lot of people thought The Power of the Dog was going to be unanimous on winning Best Picture, because it was the only movie that managed to crack in all the nominations needed to get to win Best Picture: directing, editing, screenplay, and 4 acting nominations. Like, Cumberbatch got a second, but the first time nominees for Cody Smith McPhee and the now, I believe, husband and wife duo of Kirsten Dunst and Jesse Plemons, which I'm glad that both Dunst and Plemons got in the nomination, as well as Cumberbatch as well. Smith McPhee, I just feel like, although the character is well developed and he actually does act great, it's just I think he has no emotions in his face that kind of does it. It's not like an emotionless performance like Amy Adams is in Arrival. It's just like, it's fine. So I'm kind of glad the awards did transition from Cody Smith McPhee, who just won the Golden Globe, to Troy Kotzer winning everything else. Campion's direction's not really a standout until the massive climax comes into play, like the last half hour or 35 minutes or so, because most of that is on her writing is more of a standout than her direction. But that climax really is so intense. Really fantastic from not just her direction and also but the performances from Cumberbatch to Kirsten Dunst's character. It's just like obviously the because she was drunk line is just obviously very quotable, of course, even though there might have been a little bit of a spoiler, but you don't know why. But yeah, with Phil, you can understand why he would be mad at his new sister-in-law, since Plemons' character is the brother of Phil's character. The whole gay aspect is obviously not really big notoriety as it is in Brokeback Mountain, because it's very more secretive, of course, but it is still works well in general, of course, even though obviously there's no romantic scene, of course, I will say, because that's just kind of wrong. Not because of the subject of the movie, but because since Cody Smith McPhee is now the new nephew, specifically his like is now Phil's new nephew, so that could be the reason why, obviously. So there was, but both of them kind of have they kind of have something in relation that they both have, that they're both gay, and they kind of understand where they're kind of going into a similar direction, but they really have a great connection that got them closer to a great uncle and nephew. Not romanticized relationship, but definitely something that they have a great fondness with. And now into Spielberg's West Side Story, which, although it's stated as the second adaptation of more of the stage musical, but this is more of a clear remake to the 1961 Robert Wise and Jerome Robbins movie. It's clearly evidence more of a remake to that classic. And this is getting a D as well. Now, the thing is, I did watch the 61 West Side Story, and honestly, I was not fond with it. If you're not fond of that film, you're not going to be fond with Spielberg's remake. Now, I will give credit for actually trying to make some differences to not make it a legit A remake to the original 61 remake, like putting America the day after the dance, like in the morning, or like obviously with the sword clunk being from a man to a woman, which is played by Rita Moreno, who obviously won for playing Anita in the original 61 adaptation. And obviously where the massive climax of the like obviously where the ending takes place, and there are other some notable different varieties, I would say. But yeah, it is kind of clearly, you can tell that this is truly legit a remake. Um, Obviously, Ariana DeBose as Anita. Why did that sweep the season? That was not a great win. That just felt like that's 100% what Rita Moreno did in the original. And since I was not fond of Moreno's performance in the 61 adaptation, yeah, I wasn't like I don't understand why DeBose swept that season. That made no sense. Like I can understand like with like you could have nominated somebody like Mike Feist in supporting actor, or even though despite the controversy where she is at now, Rachel Zegler for Best Actress, which I think she was one of the better performances in the movie. Same thing with, even though she just obviously won for the original film, but Rita Moreno has a better performance than she did in the original 61 adaptation. Especially with her getting the number Memory, I believe. No, wait, not Memory. Is that what it's called? Because I know I don't want to be confused with the Cats number as well. I believe it is called Memory in West Side Story as well. So that's just very odd to say the least. And I think Moreno did got in a Critics' Choice for that. So yeah, she was pretty good in this adaptation, more so than the original. Ansel Elgort, not a great casting choice. Not because the controversy, is just that I think there would have been somebody that I think would have been a better choice. And I can almost see a lot of Newsies influence in Spielberg's adaptation, because I think a lot of the sharks actually did came from the Broadway adaptations of Newsies. Some of them were even replacements. You could tell based on the Brooklyn accents. So yeah, this was definitely an unnecessary adaptation from Spielberg. This felt like more like a remake to the 61 movie. And yeah, he did not need to get in for director. The fact that he got in over Denis Villeneuve for Dune, especially when West Side Story really underperformed in a couple of places, but the fact that the Oscars had to take to it because it's Spielberg, even though there are some great moments to do that, but not for this one, to be precise. 2022, and we begin this up with kind of interesting that we had a second film adaptations of both Nightmare Alley and West Side Story. I believe they both got into Best Picture with the first film adaptations. Here there's another film adaptation that actually had the first film adaptation win Best Picture, the third Best Picture winner overall, and the first one, I believe, primarily that's a non-English one, the German adaptation of All Quiet on the Western Front by Edward Berger. I don't know why Netflix chose this as their top candidate, even though, yes, it's a non-English film and it's a war movie, but Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio and Glass Onion and Knives Out Mystery would have been better candidates for them, because they went all in on All Quiet, especially at the BAFTAs, where I think it got 14 out of 15 nominations it could have been up for, because the only nomination didn't get at BAFTA was Best Actor. And I think that's the most nominated film at BAFTA in general. It got a lot of wins over there, and it did got like 4 wins for original score, cinematography, production design, and of course international featured film, but it failed to get in for film editing and director. And speaking of director, Edward Berger became the first person to win the Best Director award at BAFTA since Pedro Almodovar for All About My Mother to win that award at BAFTA without getting an Oscar nomination. And despite the directing and editing snubs, this was clearly number 2 for Best Picture. If it would have been more evident it was going to win, it was going to be the adapted screenplay category, but it didn't win that. This is going to E. I don't have a fond memory with this movie in general. I just think, like sometimes, like I kind of mentioned, I think with some of the other war movies, like I mentioned with Hacksaw Ridge, for an example, or 1917, yeah, I'm not really fond with a lot of war movies. Like War Horse, that worked, but with Hacksaw Ridge in 1917, it didn't really work for me. Like, granted, it's kind of nice to see in more adaptations of World War I stories, But it's just like, since there's already, I have not seen the first film adaptation, which was the third Best Picture winner. So I've not seen that one from like the late 20s specifically. So I can't really judge it. Not even the TV movie from the 70s, I believe. Um, but yeah, just experiencing in this film, it just, there was just really nothing. Like, probably I think the one thing that stood out for me that I can remember the most was just the makeup, and that's it. Yeah, I don't think this needed to get a lot of nominations, even though it didn't get double digits. But 4 wins, no, not for production design. That should have gone to Avatar: The Way of Water. Cinematography, I can't really say about that. Um, Original score, that should have been the Banshees of Inisherin. And international feature, my personal pick, that winner would have been in the Belgium's Close from Lucasfilm. That would have been my pick in the international category. But yeah, overloaded with 4 wins and some nominations, especially at BAFTAs. Netflix, just no. Just no. Speaking of Avatar: The Way of Water, as I mentioned, that would have been my pick for Best Production Design and a deserving win for Best Visual Effects. And I actually like this a lot better than the first film, honestly, for me. And I'm actually going to give this an A. I really took to the movie. Now, this could be mainly because I am fond of swimming, since I do swim, of course, a couple of times, especially at my local YMCA I go to. And it's just like, well, obviously not all the time, because sometimes I usually have a bad day to go to it, because whether it be the bad weather, or specifically if it's storming, or lack of lifeguards, or specifically if I don't want to go in during the winter season to bring in a coat. It's just ridiculous. But experiencing this movie was just, in the whole water aspect, was just fantastic, with how the visuals really stood out, how James Cameron really improved his technology since the first film back in 2009. I will say, like, I think the first 45 minutes when they're just in Pandora is kind of pointless. I think if they just did like 20 minutes with them in Pandora, and then they would just go right into their new area, I think it would have worked a lot better than it did. Milton Berle as one of Jake's sons is really the standard. Obviously, they did took a lot of the Navi language out that was in most of the first film, and do it primarily in English, as was stated in the narration, because of the kids. So, with Jake, so that's kind of odd. The Sigourney Weaver daughter, it's just like, that's kind of an unnecessary character just to bring in Sigourney Weaver just for the film. I just think that just didn't work for me, honestly. Kate Winslet doesn't do much in this movie, even though she's just primarily obviously in mocap. Everyone else is basically mocap. Like, I think there's just only like one live action actor, and that's just the one who plays one of the childs, and that's it. And maybe like one of the other assistants, and that's basically it. Like, there's no other like massive like, this does feel like almost it could have been almost qualified for best animated feature, because that was the main discussion when the first Avatar came out, was like, was it going to be qualifying for the animated feature category or not? But it didn't. Same thing with The Way of Water. But yeah, despite of some people thinking it was unnecessary and the wait was not worth it, I think the wait was worth it, because I think The Way of Water was a massive improvement to the first film. We'll see how Fire and Ash goes on when we get to later this year. Next up is Martin McDonagh's The Banshees of Inisherin, his follow-up to Three Billboards, and once again reuniting In Bruges stars Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, alongside with Kerry Condon and Barry Keoghan. And this is unfortunately one of the few movies on this picture lineup that got a lot of nominations, but went home empty-handed. It didn't even crack in for original screenplay, not even for original score, which would have been my pick, or supporting actress for Kerry Condon, or not even in the supporting actor categories, which Barry Keoghan won at BAFTA, but I would have given the Best Supporting Actor Oscar to Brendan Gleeson. But it also got him and Colin Farrell their first Oscar nominations in their careers, because this was notable, is that, like with 2022, was that there were a lot of first-time nominees, except for Kate Blanchett, Michelle Yeoh, and Angela Bassett, with Blanchett being the only previous winner, and Judd Hirsch as well. So yeah, only 16 first-time nominees and 4 previous nominees, with one of them being a previous winner. And the Banshees of Inisherin had 4 of them all getting their first nominations of their career, especially with Colin Farrell for the year he had with After Yang, I believe it was called, and then he also had 13 Lives, and of course his portrayal as the Penguin of the Batman, and getting his first Oscar nomination in McDonagh's The Banshees of Inisherin, which he did was probably in third place for Best Actor, as he didn't win the Comedy Globe. With the movie ended up winning Best Motion Picture Musical or Best Motion Picture Comedy, not musical because there were no musicals nominated, over our Oscar Best Picture winner. So the Banshees of Inisherin did really do well at that ceremony before the whole changement occurred with the membership the following year. I am giving the Banshees of Inisherin an A. It's not as great on top par 3 billboards, but definitely right behind it. McDonagh gave a fantastic job once again writing this film. Although his direction's not much of a standout like it was the last time, but it was like his writing was just solid right there. It was definitely almost would have been my pick for original screenplay behind the one that would be our winner, of course. That would be my pick, obviously. Some of the cast members are fantastic, specifically just Farrell and Gleason. I will be honest, Condon, I think, was a bit of a letdown. I understand what her character was because it's basically her character's the only one that understands that everyone in her home is just basically an asshole, one way, shape, or form. Even though Keegan's character might have a little bit of a crush on her, but that's just basically it. It's obviously because she plays Farrell's sister in this movie, and it's just the fact that this guy comes back home and he wants to see his friend again, and he doesn't want to talk to him anymore for some reason and no explanation, and the only way he would tell him to stop is he would actually cut his own fingers with lamp shears. Ouch. And then obviously the massive climax that comes in the end, and just like, wow, the way how it goes is just like very odd to say the least. It just like, this movie is also very well paced, really well paced, done, by, I think it's Michael G. I forget who it was. I think I might be confused. I think it's Mickle. I believe that's his first name. G. Nielsen, I believe. If I remember. Yeah, Carter Burwell definitely should have gotten his Oscar in original score. Overall quiet, as I mentioned. It would be very interesting if you consider this a follow-up to In Bruges, even though it's not really a sequel to that. But it's just because it's the duo of Farrell and Gleason again in a Martin McDonagh movie. Thank you, and thank you very much. Or should I say no thank you for this with Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. Of course, the movie that kind of follows with Bohemian Rhapsody in the stereotypical biopic format. You can even say this with maybe with A Complete Unknown, and when we get to Springsteen Deliver Me From Nowhere, when that would get, if it does get in Best Picture of the Oscars. Yeah, this movie, I'm giving this... Yeah, I'm gonna give this an E. It's just like, but it would be a very high E, but just not like far close to the F tier. It's just like, yeah, it does the typical biopic format that you've seen in a lot of movies, and that's just nothing very special. Not even Tom Hanks as his manager, which almost felt like a leading for almost the first hour or so in the movie, and then he's gone throughout most of the rest of this. It's just like, I don't know, like, Austin Butler is just fine. It's just, I think the format is just like, it seemed makes sense in concept with Baz Luhrmann as the director, because with the whole design, production design, and costume design aspect from his wife, Catherine Martin. And this is another movie that got a couple of nominations, but won nothing. So, yeah, this movie couldn't crack any wins, not even for Best Actor, because that obviously rightfully deservingly went to the best performance of that year, Brendan Fraser in The Whale. So that made a lot of sense. But even though The Whale's not a great movie in general, because, yeah, fuck Darren Aronofsky and Samuel D. Hunter on how they portrayed obese people. But even though it did give one of the best ensembles and some of the best performances of that year. But regardless of that, with that and The Whale, but with Elvis, it's just like there's just nothing. It's just like it's the typical biopic format that even Bohemian Rhapsody did much better. Even though Freddie Mercury is more unlikable than Elvis Presley is more likable in this. Even Bob Dylan's more likable in A Complete Unknown. Despite of that, I honestly would have just given it the win for best makeup and hairstyling. I think the way how they transferred Austin Butler into Elvis Presley is fantastic by all means. This next one I don't think needs any explanation, but it's Everything Everywhere All at Once, our Best Picture winner, and rightfully I would say the best winner of this decade so far, and without a doubt, S tier. Not double S tier because there are some issues I do have with it. So it's like I do consider it the best film of that year, but I wouldn't consider like one of the best films I've ever seen in recent years. But it is definitely probably right like on with all these other S tier films that I have on this list. Yeah, the whole multiverse aspect really worked so well. The way how Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert wrote, directed the story, just with this whole laundromatic woman going through multiple dimensions of trying to figure out the situation with her relationship with, specifically not much of her husband, but with her daughter, who is played by Stephanie Hsu. And obviously getting to more respect for her husband, played by Ki Hu Kwan, of course, and then obviously with their main person who runs their rental business or something like that, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, who is fine in this, and honestly, she almost made my personal supporting actress lineup. She was probably at number 6, although my personal vote would have been, oddly enough, Angela Bassett in Black Panther Wakanda Forever, but Curtis would definitely have been my number 2 in that lineup. Stephanie Hsu, um, that could be one of the massive issues I do have with Everything Everywhere at Once. It's kind of similar to Arrival for me. Although, unlike with Michelle Yeoh, who did deserve the Best Actress winner, and the only one that does make sense to be in that lineup, even though I do like Michelle Williams in The Fablements, but that's supporting, of course. And Yeoh definitely deserved that win, although she wasn't my number 5 in terms of the personal Best Actress lineup of that year, but there were 4 other non-nominees that were above her. Um, Her 3 child performances and Janelle Monáe in Glass Onion. Um, but when it comes to Stephanie Hsu, it's very similar to Amy Adams in Arrival. She gave a very emotionless performance. And the thing is, I kind of brought this up because it's interesting that Turning Red, Pixar's movie, came out the same year and has another Asian heritage, of course. That performance in Turning Red and replace that with Shu's character, then it would have been a fantastic performance from Stephanie Hsu. Or just a better casting choice, I would say. You would switch Shu and Shang in both those performances, in both roles, then Turning Red definitely would have been one of the like, it is still for me very overrated, but definitely the most overrated Pixar movie ever, and it would have been a fantastic 4 for 4 for the entire cast. But yeah, I just think the casting was just probably not there since Shu was very emotionless in that movie. Um, yeah, I'm surprised this movie didn't get in for visual effects, although not even making in the short list by all means. It didn't like it made in the 20, but didn't make it in the final 10. And how come films like Doctor Strange or Jurassic World Dominion or 13 Lives got in place of like Everything Everywhere All at Once? Like that makes no sense, even though I've not seen like some of those films, not even Nope. But that would have made sense. Would I say it would have won almost everything? Definitely not. It just would have been for me film editing, original screenplay, actress, director, and best picture. Because I mentioned about the supporting categories, I would have given Banshee supporting actor for Gleason and Black Panther Wakanda Forever for supporting actress for Angela Bassett. But definitely the best picture winner of this decade so far. There was a movie that was actually my leader before Everything Everywhere All at Once, because Everything Everywhere All at Once was my last film of the marathon. But the movie that was actually our leader before that was Steven Spielberg's The Fablemans. What definitely should have been something that Belfast should have done, but it worked well, and easily my favorite Spielberg movie in terms of the century so far, but out of all the picture nominees, and rightfully goes into S tier. I mean, not double S, because there is some minor issues with some of the supporting performances, especially Judd Hirsch, who just only appears one scene, that's it. But this is what really should be a perfect coming-of-age movie based on a director's life, compared to like Roma, or I think Spike Lee had one as well, and Belfast. This is definitely the best coming-of-age movie based on a director's life, even though it's a kind of a fictional one because they're all compost characters. The way how Spielberg, along with Tony Kushner, who wrote the script with Spielberg, um, told the story of like how Sammy becomes this person who has a massive passion for filmmaking, that he actually really wants to do this in real life instead of just a hobby, and the way how he goes, especially with the conflicts that would go in his personal life, whether it be a bully at high school or obviously giving his first love, or specifically with the relationship with his parents that was going on. Both fantastically played by Michelle Williams and especially Paul Dano, who would have been a great nominee in Best Supporting Actor for The Fabelmans. Even though I would have preferred the Batman over The Fabelmans if we go by the Oscar rules where you're only allowed to be nominated once in supporting and not twice in that category, even though he would be in both of my lineups. But that just showed how great year Paul Dano was, and it's a shame he's not been nominated for an Oscar. And you really feel bad for both of their sides, and you go one way, shape, or form, because you understand with Sammy's mother's perspective that she is definitely leaving her family down, and then you feel about Sammy's father's side where he feels devastated that his wife is kind of somewhat basically cheating on him, and you really feel both for both their characters. And I think that's something that's based on Spielberg's life. Is it true that his parents were divorced in real life? I'm not really sure, but correct me if I'm wrong. But that really is very devastating to see that, and both performances were fantastic. Though Williams didn't make my supporting actress lineup, but Paul Dano was truly the MVP in the entire cast. Gabriel LaBelle was pretty good as well as Sammy. Obviously, when we get to him in his teen years, even though there's also that one kid who plays Sammy as a kid who was also pretty good as well. Um, yeah, but just a whole seeing the early aspects of filmmaking, what it was like in the 50s, or like for a child's perspective, like using film reel cameras, it's just really clever of way to see how even showing kids of how making technology was back then. Even Babylon kind of even did that as well, but the Fablemans I think really did a much better job. Um, Although it would have been great to see the movie would have won something like original screenplay, it just wouldn't, or Spielberg for director, which yeah, because it's just that the Fablemans would have been a great Best Picture and Best Director winner if Everything Everywhere All at Once wasn't in the conversation, or if it was released in another year. But because of that, it is a shame the Fablemans didn't had be probably was stuck at number two. Um, like for me in my personal lineup, but like I would say number 4 or 5 for best. It was probably stuck at number 4 for best picture of the Oscars, because I think Banshee. No, I would say number 3 for best picture, because All Quiet I think was ahead of it, because the Fablemans did win the Golden Globe for motion picture drama over like, but it was kind of obvious like films like Tar and Top Gun Maverick and Avatar: The Way of Water, and Elvis. So, and that would be the last time. And it was glad that at least the Fablemans did got to win sometime in the televised awards season, even though it was the Golden Globes. And now into Tar, Todd Field's massive comeback since Little Children back in 2006. He had so many movies he wanted to develop but never came to be, and this finally made his long, massive comeback of this about the scandalous conductor's allegations. I am gonna give this a D. I just like it kind of did start out decently, but then it just kind of goes into like this controversy does not want to stop her from preventing what she does best as a great conductor. And I don't know if it's with Todd Field the way how he either directed or wrote the film, or with Kate Blanchett's performance. And ironically, Field actually wrecked his car just to get Blanchett to do the role. That's a very odd story from what I heard. But yeah, I just don't really have a sense with this movie. I mean, she's just basically the main focus with Lydia Tarr specifically, the character Blanche plays, and just like no other character, not even Lydia's wife, I believe. So it just doesn't make any sense. Not even the relationship with her daughter, I believe, and just it's just like you stay out of my way, and I would not hurt you. So yeah, I almost considered this an E, but since it did kind of start out decently well, I'm gonna just keep it in D. So not also Everything Everywhere at Once was a movie that came out at the beginning of the year that was up for Best Picture. Top Gun Maverick was another movie as well. So both movies were talked about for Best Picture when both of them came out in April and May respectively. Especially with Top Gun Maverick being released in the award season. Now, I did watch the original Top Gun prior to the marathon I had that year, and like with critics, I really felt mixed with the movie. I just think it didn't really needed to get like a lot of nominations. Like the cinematography was great, the sounds was great, but it's just like the story was not that great, and some of the performances was just not fantastic. I do consider this a bit better, but not by much. So I am gonna put this. I'm I'm gonna put this in C. It's all right. Um, it is definitely a massive improvement to the first film. There are some better performances in this. It's just that it kind of is almost the same movie. That's kind of the premise. It's the same movie, but it just takes place years in the future. Obviously, with Miles Teller playing the son of Maverick's friend that he had in the first film, and his friend's son are now working together. And then the romance plot, which I think did work a little bit better with Jennifer Connelly, who plays this barmaid who is just by the area, an old friend that we don't see in the original film. I think she was actually pretty good, and I'm surprised. Could have been a great candidate in the supporting categories for supporting actress, because I think she was the MVP in the entire cast, with Miles Teller and Tom Cruise kind of right behind it. Both songs from this movie, One Republic's "I Ain't Worried," that is in the movie in context because of the whole beach scene and like with them playing volleyball with all the pilots having a fun time in the montage scene. And then you have Lady Gaga's "Hold My Hand," which got the nomination, and great song by the way for both of them, both in context. But "Hold My Hand" really did fantastic. It is in the bar scene when Maverick wants to try to go, not in the first bar scene, but when the bar is not open, Maverick's trying to find his Ina Conley's character, and then it obviously plays it again at the end credits. Fantastic, both in context, songs in context in the movies. But I think "Hold My Hand" is the superior one. I can't really say would have been my pick because I've not seen "Tell It Like a Woman" or RRR. Sorry. But yeah, the songs are definitely memorable. I think those two songs are memorable than "Danger Zone" and "Take My Breath Away" from the original film. Sorry. Um, yeah, I think those are the things I only remember the most are the two new songs that were made for the movie and Jennifer Connelly's performance. And now we come into Triangle of Sadness. And if you're basically not a fucked up horror movie from Neon like Titan, if you're a Neon movie that wins the Palme d'Or of the Cannes Film Festival, you, especially if it's an original movie, you automatically get nominated for original screenplay, director, and best picture. That would happen, of course, not just with Parasite, but with Anatomy of a Fall, Anora, and what will most likely happen this upcoming season with It Was Just an Accident. But this was the first film for me since Lady Bird that pissed me off. And easily the worst picture nominee of this decade so far, rightfully goes into F. I mean, what the fuck was Ruben Östlund thinking? I mean, I loved his last film, The Square. It would have been my personal pick in the international category back in 2017. And then he does this film? What was he thinking? I mean, this three chapter structures is very interesting because there's no primarily main character. Although it is worth noting that obviously it's notable that one of the main stars, Sharply Dean, did unfortunately pass away from a health complication she had from a surgery in the past that got into her final year before her tragic death at a young age, before the movie got its U.S. release and its fall festival run like a TIFF. That's very unfortunate. But this movie did kind of got Harris Dickinson and Dolly Delano in the spotlight, especially Harris Dickinson. But then you have like Woody Harrelson as this drunk captain who's just a piece of shit throughout the second chapter when they're on that boat. Minus obviously the two lovers, which are Dickinson and Dean's character, and you can say Dolly DeLeon's character, at least in the second half. Most of them are just basically a piece of shit. Although there are some that like unable to speak, and one that is a crew member that's almost accused of being a Somali pirate. And then obviously with DeLeon's character kind of now being the captain in charge of the third act in the island, and just like what she does, just like I don't understand. It's just like what on earth is all these characters doing? It's just like yeah, it's kind of a survival story thing at the third act. It's just like the second act basically is just everyone's almost an asshole, and then you have this entire vomiting montage specifically, and this massive flooding and stuff like that. Let alone one of them ended up taking the shits as well. It's just like in Harrison's dialogue, and then the one who does like the whole, like I think it's a Russian guy that just all this says, "As Russians are better" or something like that. It's just like no, this movie did not need to be up for any Oscars. Like, why Ruben Östlund got this out of nowhere nomination for Best Director? Like, it made no sense to me. It just, because since a Neon film won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, it automatically has to go into the directing slot. It's like a reserve spot for that now, as we've seen, as Cannes been more Franklin. If it's a non-Neon film that wins at Cannes, then it would be massive question mark. But really. I mean, yeah, easily the worst picture nominee of this decade so far. And it's very odd how well the movie did. It's surprising Dolly De Leon didn't get in for supporting actress, which that was very interesting. I was predicting her, but not the film for anything else, for like screenplay, director, and picture, and got all those three and not for her. So that's very odd. But yeah. Yeah, obviously I don't have this movie in the Criterion Collection because it is easily the worst picture nominee of this decade so far. Going to a much better note, we wrap up 2022 with Women Talking, or as Mark Wahlberg called it, Women Are Talking. Even Sarah Polley ended up accidentally saying that when the movie won the Robert Altman Award at the Spirit Awards, when she accidentally said that. So thanks a lot, Marky Mark. You got Sarah Polley tongue twisted there with her saying that. Yeah, this is easily going in S tier for me. I was really blown away by this movie. Obviously, many people compare this as 12 Angry Men with 12 Angry Women, although a few of them are just girls. But this is a very fantastic movie on showing the dark side on specific religions. Like, the Mennonite Church here is kind of like it's like one of those religions that doesn't have the true freedom that it doesn't have here in the U.S., kind of similar to Amishes and especially Jehovah's Witnesses, and just shows there are some danger aspects when it comes to the religions that might affect in your life. And of course, with the Mennonite Church is that the men have the more empowerment compared to the women, and this is one of the massive decision of having either the women leave their life out of the church, stay, or fight against the men for their true freedom in their religion. And this obviously brings a massive debate with many of the women, and only one guy that is in the entirety and premise in the movie, which is just the boy's school teacher, which of course is played by Ben Whishaw, who obviously is in love with one of the Mennonite, who actually left the Mennonite church, and then came back, of course, to be the boy's teacher. With Wishaw's character falling in love with Rooney Mara's character, who is pregnant. They really want to be together, but it's just the situations they're going through with not just the church, but also with the decision of where they have to be in. And but Rooney Mara and Ben Whishaw are the clear standouts. Claire Foy and Jessie Buckley are pretty fine in their roles, but Sarah Polley, the way how she both directed and wrote the script gave the best script of 2022. I mean, she easily did deserve the win for Best Adapted Screenplay, and this was the first film since The Post to be a one and done. And although the movie had a massive struggling throughout the award season, I remembered I was predicting this in the early stages as the Best Picture frontrunner, because with the past 2 years of having female-directed movies winning Best Picture, and this does feel like a movie with women empowerment and like a SAG Ensemble winner, and it made a lot of sense with Sarah Polley winning the screenplay win, and maybe one of the acting takes the wins, like in the supporting actress category. It would have made a lot of sense, but then it did okay at the Globes, but failed, but only getting in screenplay and score. And then it did great at Critics' Choice and Indie Spirits, but then failed at the BAFTAs and the Guilds, except the SAG Ensemble nomination and the WGA nomination. And after all the struggles, it just gets Best Picture and wins Adapted Screenplay. So, yeah. But definitely a deservingly so for Best Picture nomination. Obviously a deserving win for Adapted Screenplay. I really wish Sarah Polley would have been in for director. She would have been a better candidate than Ruben Östlund, in my personal opinion. 2023 has to be probably one of the most easiest categories to predict the nominations, because it was the first time ever since both the Oscars and Producers Guild's Best Picture expansions. This was the first time ever that they have matched all 10 nominees. The BAFTA long list almost did as well. They went 9 out of 10 on that one. We begin this up with our TIFF People's Choice Award winner, and a movie that pretty much kind of started that up after it won that award. American Fiction, one of the 2 debuted features on this list, the directorial debut of Cord Jefferson, which he did swept the Adapted Screenplay category. He won Critics' Choice, he won BAFTA, which was the film's only nomination, obviously the Oscar, and of course the Writers Guild, which that was the last ceremony after the Oscars because it was delayed due to the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strike, which that's obviously a notable year for 2023, other than Barbenheimer, of course. He even did one at Indie Spirits for Best Screenplay, but he was not up at the Globes for Screenplay in general. I am going to give this one a C. I do understand that this is kind of like a unique idea of almost like a big fuck you to white people and how they view black culture in the realms of literature, the stereotypical way. It is a very interesting concept of having a black writer who's going in this like massive writer's block or having not been accepted what he does, decided to do the mockery style of what average white people would think when it comes to black culture and literature, and then all the white people seem to think it's one of the best things ever. And obviously our main character played by Jeffrey Wright obviously is a secret identity of the fake author he made, just so it's not really clearly him. But then, of course, he has some issues that's going on in his personal life, not just a relationship he has, but with his mother dealing with dementia. All this is mainly because he lost his sister at the beginning of the movie. Jeffrey Wright is actually pretty good in this movie, and it's very amazing he got his first Oscar nomination of his career, especially in for leading, because he's obviously notable in a lot of major supporting roles in his career, but this one getting a massive leading role for his career for his first Oscar nomination is definitely a standout. And I also did love Cord Jefferson's Oscar speech on, like, why we are making these movies so over budgeted, and like why not a movie that it was like $10 million or like $5 million or something like that, because the cheaper the budget is, the better the movie would become. That's kind of the whole summary I would say about his speech. Because this movie was just on a $10 million budget, although it only grossed $23 million worldwide, as this is kind of an Amazon MGM movie. So there might have been some maybe potential stream people who were waiting to be released on Amazon Prime. But it does show that the lesser of a budget, you get more opportunities to be in bigger categories like Best Picture of the Oscars and even taking a win. I will say a lot of the supporting performances didn't really stood out to me as much. I mean, the romance plot, Sterling Gang Brown's plot as his gay brother, doesn't really have much aspect going into throughout most of the movie. And then obviously with the mother played by Leslie Uggams, like the dementia thing was not really the first time I've seen something like this. Obviously before, obviously not just we had the father, but even Still Alice. But it just I didn't think was not really that great how it was executed in the movie. Maybe it might have done something better in the original novel Erasure, but yeah, so I can see why Leslie Uggams wasn't even recognized, because it's not really a memorable performance. Although I think it's just okay, and I wouldn't mind it like an adapted screenplay or Best Actor nomination, but it's just not in Best Picture for me. Not because I'm white, it's just that there are some other issues, because I really love the message. It's just that it's kind of like some of the performances just didn't work for me, except for our main character. Next up, Anatomy of a Fall, the French-English movie from Justine Triet, co-written by her husband Artur Harari, who is also a filmmaker as well. This followed with Parasite and Triangle of Sadness, of course, to win the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival and ended up getting nominated for the Oscars for Picture Director and won for Original Screenplay. I am putting this one in A. I really did took to this whole courtroom drama movie. Now, obviously, it's not the typical courtroom dramas you usually see in a lot of American motion pictures. Since this movie is setting in France, you get a whole different experience in a French court drama. Especially since half of this movie is in English, you really kind of get the feeling and how a court style in French is a little bit more different compared to the typical one in the U.S. Even though there are some similar aspects to it. Now, obviously, this movie is half in English and half in French, and although Neon did state that there was a little bit more French in the movie, I would say there's a lot more English in the movie, and that's mainly due to our main character's performance, played by Sandra Hüller, who is actually named Sandra, by all means. And I know there are some people that think it didn't qualify because of Triet's controversial speech that she gave at Cannes calling out the French president. But I think with the movie being half in English and half in French, and I think there's a little bit more English, more so than French, I don't consider this a non-English film, and I kind of ruled it ineligible in my Best Animated Documentary or International Feature lineup in my personal Oscar lineup of that year because I ruled it ineligible. Obviously, Past Lives was obviously eligible regardless because it's a U.S. production. But Anatomy of a Fall, it would be ineligible for me. But it still did manage to do well, of course. The original screenplay win, I actually really do like that win, although it would not have been my pick. Sandra Hüller is great in that nomination and almost a perfect Best Actress lineup. We'll get to the one person I didn't think we did not need to be in there. I am very happy that Justin Triet did got in the directing nomination, although that would not been my top female directing pick. Obviously, you know who that would be when we get to the other one, and it's not the next one, by the way. I'm very glad I got in for Best Picture, but can I just say, how on earth was Milo McCarter Gardner overlooked this entire season for Best Supporting Actor? I mean, like, if you're not counting the Critics' Choice for the Young Actor or Actress category, he got totally shafted this entire season. Yes, Hooler is the main lead, but Gardner is the true supporting performance in the movie as Sandra's son, and probably the only other big, massive key witness of his dad's death. Yeah, because it's still the massive question is obviously with this movie, did she do it or not? It's that's obviously still the open air because the audience still doesn't even know, and according to obviously the final result, we still don't even know yet because obviously there's not really much. And I'm very glad that Trieta and Harari decided to let the audience decide to make the decision or not. But that's mainly due to the credit from some of the fantastic performances by Hooler, Gardner, and even the actor who played Sandra's husband in the movie. For all the backstory scenes, all the flashback scenes that occurs to court, including the audio recording that was in the court that we heard that actually didn't saw a physical scene in the movie. Messy the dog is definitely very iconic in this movie. Obviously, the previous year you had the Banshees of Inisherin with I forget what the donkey's name was, but you had the year of donkeys the previous year, and now you have a dog representing as the animal for this year, even though it's just in one of the picture nominees. But I think there might have been some in Poor Things, but that's not saying much. But yeah, this was almost like the year of the dog for Messi specifically. I'm also very curious. I'm very curious if somebody will actually do a kind of like a versus battle between this film and Otto Preminger's Anatomy of a Murder. Both movies that almost have a similar title, and both movies are in the Criterion Collection, and both courtroom dramas. Where Anatomy of a Murder, her from Otto Preminger was in the perspective of the lawyer. Anatomy Falls mainly the perspective of the main person that is accused of potentially maybe she had killed her husband or not. Yeah, I'm very curious if that would actually be the case. So yeah, definitely. I think out of all, it's a toss up between that and our next one, but I think this maybe be my favorite neon movie to get a Best Picture nomination so far. All right, let's get into Barbie. I know many people are wondering where I'm going to be putting this one in. Let's see. Yep, I'm not really big on Barbie. So yeah, after a massive surprise from being with her Greta Gerwig's previous film with Little Women, Barbie was just a massive disappointment. I just didn't really get the fun out of this. It's not funny, although it kind of did at the beginning, I would say. It's just like I almost feel like I've seen this story before. Like, the not really a typical fish out of water story where she comes in the real world. Like, I know it's odd comparing to, like, a lot of live action movies based on animated series that would have just the animated character come into the real world and have more fondness with an unoriginal human character. Although, in this time, with the unoriginal human character being the main character of the movie and not the titular stars, at least with Barbie, they do the opposite on that. And Barbie is our true main character, and the unoriginal human character is just a true supporting performance. Now, the concept, I would say the trailers had a bit of a fun scenario having the idea of Barbie going into the real world and trying to figure out her, like, almost like existential crisis she's going on of having getting her flat feet and then all the scenarios that had occurred in one of her mornings. It's just like she doesn't know what's going on and she has to go to the real world to find out what. And obviously, Ken decided to tag along and found out that men were dominant in the real world compared to the Barbie world, where the Barbie world is obviously dominated by women. Yeah, it kind of doesn't really have a unique message, I would say, because it's something we have seen this many times before. And America Ferrera's monologue, not that memorable, honestly. I don't understand how she got this Best Supporting Actress nomination. That just makes no sense just for the monologue. It's just like I feel like she's just out of put in this movie. I feel like she just doesn't really do anything other than just the monologue and the main answer and why Barbie has that existential crisis. And when kind of not really much of a twist, but when it kind of comes into a little bit, it's like, really? I am kind of surprised that the monologue was not at the end of the movie. I thought that was going to be it, but no. I do like the little moments with the Ruth Handler scenes, like with obviously the CEO of Mattel, who was played by Will Ferrell in this movie. Which, speaking of Ferrell, he's not actually a stand-on to the cast, but the thing is, he's not actually being comedic in this movie by all means, other than probably the one chase scene, and that's it. But yeah, he doesn't really have much to do in this movie. He's not really an antagonist by all means. I would almost say feel like Ken could be the antagonist, if you might know what I'm talking about. Yeah, but with the Ruth Handler scenes, there are definitely some of the best scenes in the movie, whether it be when Barbie has tea with her or when she comes into the Barbie world and just walks Barbie to a place that kind of does. Like some sort of open field area, if you know what I'm talking about near the end of the movie. As for the songs themselves, I'm Just Canon, What Was I Made For are great, and Dance the Night, but they don't work well in context with the movie. The only song that actually works great in context, and is probably the best song of the movie in context with the film, is Pink, both the main one and the Bad Day version. I mean, I would really love to own, like, I know somebody on YouTube did this, combining both the main version and the Bad Day one as one track. Because that's something the Barbie soundtrack does not have, is like a single track for both versions to play, which somebody would have done that in the actual soundtrack, but nope, somebody actually did that on YouTube, so that was kind of great. So yeah, Pink is easily the best song of that movie in context with Barbie. I will admit there are some good things about the movie, like the costume design. The production design's spectacular, especially in the realms of the Barbie world, to make it more gigantic than we assumed. But yeah, I would not put this up in picture, director, actress, supporting actor, supporting actress, adapted screenplay, which I would have said because of the pre-existing character rule, or some people would say original. It would just be text only, like costume, production, makeup, and hairstyling, which I was surprised was overlooked, and just for the song Pink. That's kind of it. It's just like, it's not really a thing for me. It's like not my, I wouldn't say cup of tea or cup of coffee, but it's just like not because I'm a boy, a young man or something like that. It's just that it was just not a fun movie for me. But here's something that is a fun movie, and what would be considered a brand new Christmas classic, Alexander Payne's The Holdovers. Which, like the previous 2 years with King Richard, Alexander Payne was the only director at the Oscars that, out of all the directors of the Best Picture nominated films, that was not nominated for an Oscar, because he only directed the movie. He didn't produce it, he didn't co-wrote the film. He just directed it, so very sad that he didn't get any recognition for the directing category. I am putting this one in. I'm going to put this in B, but it would be a very high B. It almost would have gotten to A, but I'll get into that and why. Yeah, I do love the whole story of this unique connection between a teacher and a student who, like, both have sour things in their life, where a teacher is just crazy and just not that fun, and then the student who just has troubled lives with his parents, especially his stepfather and mother, who thinks that he should go to military school if he really goes bad in this. And then when, of course, when it came to the holiday season, and their parents decided to goof around, he had to be stuck in the campus all alone in Christmas, and only had a teacher that was left behind to do the administrative for all the students that were not behind, and one of the main cafeteria aides, which is Davine Joy Randolph. I know there was another one, custodian worker, that was also in it, but that was not by much. But the whole unique journey of this small ensemble, with just primarily three actors, with Paul Giamatti, Davine Joy Randolph, and Dominic Sessa, the latter of which on his debut feature, all of which really have a unique personality and interesting development that all three of them would have. Especially with the connection between our main two characters with Giamatti and Sessa. Now, I know Sessa was campaign supporting that season, but he's technically a co-lead, because it's kind of like Mahershala Ali in Green Book, where he's not really kind of like the main sentient character, but he almost appears likely every single scene. But he's also the main important character in the main plot for the movie as well, with our main character. So it is technically a co-lead, and Dave Winger and Randolph easily supporting and definitely deserved that Best Supporting Actress win. Probably the best win in that category of this decade so far. She is definitely fantastic in that role, especially since she kind of stands out better than all the other four nominees in that category. I also want to shout out Carrie Preston in this movie. Although she's not in the movie that much, but she's kind of like the friendly coworker that really understands Giamatti's character, and the only one that Giamatti really kind of has a thing for. But especially when she invited all three of them to come to the Christmas party at her house, and there's kind of like a nice moment with Sessa, and especially with one of the girls that's at the party. But also a scene that I really felt heartbroken when it came to Giamatti's character, what he saw, and that was really unfortunate for him. Unfortunately, the one thing that does prevent it from being in the A tier is obviously the ending, because Agnes, which is a Dominic Sessa's character specifically, but Agnes's parents and specifically his mother and stepfather are a piece of shit. I can see why Paul, which that's actually the teacher's name, by the way. So, I can see why Paul basically said he didn't give a shit of what his parents were gonna do, because he understand a lesson of how to care about somebody that I think the principal kind of told him to during the massive Christmas break. And he finally learned that lesson and just really confronted how his parents are. And almost basically, yeah, Agnes's parents are a piece of shit because obviously of what is going on in the situation with Agnes's real life father, who has in a mental facility by all means, and the fact that the parents found out that he visited him, they were pissed off and want him to go to military school, but he wanted to defend Agnes because he knew that his life was going to be over. It's almost like Paul is almost telling them, and obviously he stated that he was all alone in Christmas, because I would have almost loved the scene, I think you two just want to fuck around throughout the entirety of your winter break just so you can make your love without him around. And that's almost kind of like what it is. It's like, yeah, Agnes's parents are even much worser than Agnes himself. So, yeah. The ending just kind of threw off a bit, but I did love that anger moment that Giamatti did, because with that anger moment scene and everything else, Giamatti would have been my personal pick for Best Actor. I'm did glad he got 2 wins. Obviously sacrificed Comedy Globe, but he did took Critics' Choice as well over our Best Actor winner. Yeah, this is definitely going to be a Christmas classic everyone's going to remember. I would go back to it, but I would just not watch the ending. Next up, Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese's biopic on the Osage Indian murders that took place like around the late 1910s to 1920s and a little bit so on, especially on Ernest Burkhart and his native wife Molly. I had a little bit of speculation coming into this movie because I know this movie was like another film that was over 3 hours. And I know many people would say that's one of the biggest criticisms everyone said about this movie. Especially a lot of people now would say that if he would make Goodfellas today, I think John Campea said this, if Goodfellas was made today, it would have been 4 hours. But obviously Scorsese really had the massive passion for this movie because this movie got delayed so many times. And it was worth it for the delays because this is, I think, his best movie I've seen of the century so far. A true masterpiece, without a doubt, going in double S tier. I was blown away by this movie. This almost did top my number one of that year, because it was I think the fourth to last film in that picture lineup. Because I saw Anatomy of a Fall, then our number two, then 2 others who we'll get into later on, and then obviously my number one of that year we'll get into as well later on this list. I was just blown away by the whole scenario because going in blind with this. Because when I was with me going in blind in this, I had a unique experience watching the revealment of what was going on in these murder trials, the relationship between Ernest and Molly, and with Ernest's relationship with I believe his uncle. Yeah, his uncle William, played by Robert De Niro. And everything comes into round, and you finally understand once the movie progresses on, and it's really very tragic of how the natives unfortunately lost a lot of people and some the lands that was going on because of how these white people want to actually pretend that they're really are friends with these natives, but it turns out it's actually a massive fluke. Ook. And this was all real, of course, and it is very unfortunate what's going on, especially how Molly was struggling throughout most of the illness she was going through throughout the second half of this movie. Now, I know some people are divided if she's leading or supporting, because I can see why she's supporting, because most of her time throughout the rest of the movie is mainly in bed. But after seeing the movie, yeah, I do find her leading. But can I just say, how on earth Leonardo DiCaprio was overlooked this season? I mean, he gave a fantastic performance, definitely his best one, topping over Don't Look Up, and probably one of my favorite performances from him because he is so good in this that he only got what, a Globe nomination for actor in a drama, and that's it. Like, I think a lot of people probably assumed he produced the film, which I thought as well, but I think many people said, well, he already won already, and he already got his first post-win nomination, so we don't need to nominate him again. But that's unfortunate, because he is so good in this movie. Yeah, Lily Gladstone definitely would be in my Best Actress lineup. Robert De Niro would actually be my pick for Best Supporting Actor. He was fantastic as well in this. Definitely, I would say his best performance of the century so far. Even though I know some people would say The Irishman, maybe. I don't know, like Best Actor, how on earth did it not get in for Best Adapted Screenplay? I mean, the way how Eric Roth, yes, Roth did wrote this film, along with Scorsese, the way how they both wrote this movie, just, like, obviously with me going in blind, that was just so creative. And I know it was the year of one specific filmmaker, but honestly, you'll see why when I give my thoughts on our Best Picture winner. Scorsese would have been my pick for Best Director. He did a fantastic job directing this movie. He was definitely clearly second place throughout that season, even though he oddly missed at BAFTA. And that movie really kind of underperformed, only getting in for Picture and De Niro in the top 8 categories. Sheesh. But yeah, obviously, this movie didn't really have much of a big theatrical experience for many people because it was a limited run because this was an Apple movie, since, of course, streaming movies kind of really do things. But at least Apple knows, unlike Netflix, how to release their movies theatrically. But it did lost a lot of money, unfortunately. But because nowadays, people would rather want to watch a long YouTube video that's 3 hours or so, more so than a long movie that is 3 hours. I mean, what's the difference? Hello? Yeah, I would say it is definitely one of the Best Picture nominees, but it's not my pick for Best Picture. There is another film from this year that is going in the double S tier list as well. And then we come into Maestro. Again, what's with Netflix choosing the wrong candidate for their big Best Picture capacity? I mean, well, this wasn't really a strong year for Netflix in general, but like, did like Nyad a lot more than many people did, and Nimona would have been good. Heck, even Society of Snow made the most sense, I would say, especially for a non-English film. But Maestro is just because since Bradley Cooper and the Oscars seems to love him, even though they can't give him the win, it just makes no sense. Yeah, this is going in E. It's very forgetful. I mean, why did it get like picture, actor, actress, original screenplay for some reason? Like, okay, sound I can understand that, but like in the top 8 categories, no. Like, yeah, Spielberg did produce the film, but like just because he produced the film, that doesn't mean it automatically needs to get a Best Picture nomination. I mean, look at Memoirs of Geisha, but then again, that movie was very mean-spirited, so that's the massive difference. But Maestro does kind of follow like Elvis in this typical biopic format of Leonard Bernstein and the relationship with his wife Felicia, I believe, Felicity, something like that. And then obviously the creativity of music. I will say there is a great scene of the early development of the town and using the audio of New York, New York from the 2014 Broadway revival. That was actually that rendition that was in the Macy's Parade in 2014. And speaking of the Macy's Parade, there is that one scene where it was they were having this art where Leonard and Felicity were having an argument during when the parade was going by, and you see the aviator Snoopy balloon kind of going through it. So yeah, I know that could have been also an element in like Macy's Parade in pop culture, but that was just for one scene, and I don't think it was worth talking about that movie because it's so very forgetful. And I think this is the only way I would talk about Maestro here. It just like there's just it just follows the typical format. And yeah, Carey Mulligan definitely would not be in my Best Actress lineup, or Bradley Cooper in Best Actor. Not even makeup, honestly, because it just didn't seem right with Cooper casting himself as Bernstein. It just makes no sense. I know he has another movie planning to come out this year, I believe also for Netflix, but I think Netflix might be going towards Jay Kelly, a Bombox film. But we'll see how both those movies do, and we'll see if Cooper can try to get another Oscar nomination and lose again. Kind of like how Killers of the Flower Moon did when it was the biggest loser that year, become the third Scorsese film and final film of that trilogy to go 0 for 10 of the Oscars. Jeez. Next up is Oppenheimer. So you might have seen where I'm kind of going with this because as you saw, I said other things that Oppenheimer did win I could have gone with. Like, I obviously said Killers of the Flower Moon would have been my pick for director and supporting actor, and The Holdovers with not just the supporting actress win, but even for best actor. You might know where I'm going with this with Oppenheimer, and yeah, I'm sorry to do this, but yeah, it's a D for me. I was really disappointed on this movie, and this was obviously the last film I was watching, and it just like it wasn't the 3 hours that did it for me. It's just like it just felt so not boring but bland. Not in the typical biopic format, but it just like it was so bland. Like I do get it with the creative experience of having two perspectives with obviously Robert J. Oppenheimer's perspective all in color, and then I forget Downey Jr.'s character, but all of his perspectives in black and white. And then you have like a couple of things. Like I will admit, there are some good moments. Like there are a couple of great acting performances from Cillian Murphy and Emily Blunt. But it would be the last hour that I really did took to. The first 2 hours, not by much. It just like no wait, is it 4 hours? No, like yeah, the first hour of the movie and the second hour, it's just like I think it's like nearing the last hour or so, or the last half hour, or last 45 minutes. Those were probably the best things. Like when we got to the climax part, like with all the final conclusions of all the courtroom battles and stuff like that, with about Robert J. Oppenheimer's discussion if he's a communist or not. Obviously, that's kind of one of the massive discussions, but obviously, this is, of course, the person that had invented the atomic bomb that would, of course, be an element in World War II. And obviously, we're glad we didn't get a movie scene, an entire scene with that bomb in general, because it's obviously just more in his perspective, and just getting to see a different interpretations of the atomic bomb was also pretty creative, especially in the one I think imagination sequence he has with all the people in the audience and stuff like that. But yeah, I would not nominate most of this. Murphy and Blunt might have made it, would be making in the supporting lineup. Same thing with Florence Pugh. The script was okay, but it was just for the climax. Technical aspects, sound, I can understand that. Visual effects, I can also understand that, even though I also understand why it did not even make in the 20 candidates. But it is honestly one of the better visual effects movies that I saw, even though I had not seen like The Creator or Godzilla or Guardians or Mission Impossible, even though I did watch Napoleon, but that's just comparing to that and all the animated feature nominees. So yeah, I wasn't big on Oppenheimer. Now the question is, would I go back to Barbie or would I go back to Oppenheimer? Easily would be Oppenheimer because I don't understand the message with Barbie. Next up is a movie that really feels something for me. A movie that really feels close to my heart in an emotional aspect. Not on how personally on this life, but this is like a movie that really touched me, and it's actually probably the one of the only notable movies I've ever cried to when it ended, and that is of course Past Lives. And without a doubt, double S tier. It is would have been my pick for Best Picture, and obviously my pick for Best Original Screenplay, and what is my favorite film of the decade so far. Now, I have not seen any 2025 movies specifically, but in terms of just all the Oscar-nominated movies, specifically all the Best Picture nominees, specifically this decade, it is easily the best one with Killers of the Flower Moon right behind it. past lives really meant so much to me because as somebody who really wants to who has experience with childhood crushes, um, I can understand that. And then, obviously, reconnecting with old friends that you have not seen in a long time, and you might have a softer opinion on them, especially romanticized or something like that. But then you have to deal with some things you can't change in the past or stuff like that, or obviously can't change right now because some things have already occurred. And the way how Celine Song loosely based this on her life, she really took it to a whole personal level, and I really felt not also great for her, but also for all three of the actors in this film, even the two child actors that play the young versions of our main two characters, because Greta Lee, Teo Yo, and John Magaro, and even the two child actors are fantastic in the first act, are fantastic, and that was kind of a surprise for me. I thought, okay, they were just gonna, it would be the entirety, like what would become known as, I would say, Act 3 of the entirety of the movie, where they just reunite and then they would have more of a stronger connection that Greta Lee's character would break up with John Magaro, or specifically divorce John Magaro's husband to go back with Teo Yo's character. But no, it kind of really shows the opposite and the reality aside of not just heartbreaks, but also childhood crushes and things you can't really change in the past romantically, and just like you have to keep it where it is. And you really feel sorry for all three characters, not just our main two, but even John Magaro's character, because you can also see where he's coming from, because he understands the whole concept of childhood crushes. He's not jealous, and he understands obviously with the his wife's Korean heritage. When it's like I'm talking a lot more about the third act more so than the first two acts, because the first act is just them as child, and then specifically Teo Yo and Selena Greta Lee's characters as childs, and then they reunite through Skype in like a little bit in the late 2000s, and then they reunite like years later in like mid 2010s or something like that, where our male Teo Yo is on vacation to the U.S., reunites with the childhood crush, meets it's her husband, and then they all have this unique conversation like the negative sides and like um, the positive sides and all how they much have to respect one another, and you just feel sorry for all three of them of all the guilt they are having. And all three performances were fantastic. They all should have been nominated for best act in the acting categories. Celine Song definitely should have been in for best director, but without a doubt this movie should have won best original screenplay and best picture. It is my favorite picture nominee of this decade so far. And I don't know if there's going to be another movie that would top me actually getting in a very emotional level. But there could be another movie in the second half of this decade that might top it. And this is actually also going to be the last movie here that will be in the double S tier. Next up is Poor Things, Yorgos Lanthimos' follow-up to The Favorite. Oh boy, I am giving this an S tier without a doubt. I had a blast watching this movie with the whole, specifically because of Bella Baxter. Emily Stone gave the best performance of the year and probably the best actress winner, I think, in recent years, because Bella Baxter was the character of that year. And even though, yeah, you had Barbie and Robert J. Oppenheimer, but it was easily Bella Baxter. I mean, the way how Emily portrayed this character is just so fantastic. And obviously the whole journey she goes from, obviously, because the whole concept is, for those who don't know, if you've seen the beginning of the Poor Things, is that Bella is basically almost a deceased woman, but it's regained from the dead from Willem Dafoe, who is a crazy scientist, brain of her unborn child and put it in her, and then she comes a completely almost a rebirth person of a new different person that wants to do something. Like, obviously throughout the movie she just wants to dance, have sex, or read, and it's just like she just wants to live and even help others, and even would follow in, almost wants to become a doctor like Defoe's character. Although there are some people she would follow in conflicts, like Rami Youssef, who obviously is character who wants to actually marry to Bella, obviously who was close to Defoe's character, and then Ruffalo's character who just takes her out on this massive journey, all just for the sexual acts. I would say this movie did not get a double S tier because all the sex scenes in this movie, there's a lot in this movie. So yeah, this is truly an R-rated movie. But without that aspect alone, just Bella's journey going from like an like an adult child to almost fully grown up in like a few days or a month or so through her journey she had went through outside of her original home is just pure fantastic. And she completely becomes a different woman who she is, especially when it comes to the massive climax when she returns home. Now, this next thing I'm going to say is going to be a very odd, but this is something that really felt something connected to me about this movie a lot more so, especially with Bella, is that although the character is not specifically, as we mentioned, that her brain is the brain of her unborn child, Bella Baxter feels like like a good portrayal of autism in the movies. I know Bella is not autistic, obviously, because her brain is the child, but Bella does feel like she has the autistic traits. You can really think about it because I also kind of felt connected with that because with all the dance moves, not really in the sexual acts, there's no way in that, have a massive subject of interest, like with Bella for reading, and for me, like movies, the Macy's Parade and stuff like that. So yeah, I really felt a strong connection with Bella throughout this movie and really got me into a personal level that it's like the best autistic performance that is not an autistic performance. Because obviously the character's not autistic, of course, but it just feels like it when you see this performance. Yeah, Willem Dafoe is fantastic on this one, as well as Rama Youssef and Mark Ruffalo. Yeah, the supporting cast is really great. I know there was also Christopher Abbott was in this movie. I did not know Margaret Qualley was in this movie. Catherine Hunter, obviously I know her from the tragedy of Macbeth. Bit of a very odd performance, I will say. Not as crazy as her, a little bit more crazier than her Macbeth performance, but I that's very interesting. And who was other than Christopher Abbott? Who was the other character? Hannah Shagidal, also the lazy old woman in that cruise ship they were in. Definitely also fantastic performance as well. So yeah, there was a lot of great performances outside of like the main three performances with Stone, Defoe, and Ruffalo. And you can even count Rami Youssef. There's a lot of great other supporting performances, even just for their few 2 or 3 scenes or stuff like that. And also, the whole setting of the movie is just fantastic. This fantasy setting. I mean, it definitely deserved the wins for production design, costume design easily. I can't really say on makeup and hairstyling because I've not watched Golda. But it definitely also should have won for film editing. Tony McNamara definitely should have won Best Adapted Screenplay. I am very happy Emily Stone did won Best Actress. And if I was seeing the movie, if I saw the Best Picture nominees that year before the Oscars, I would have been happy to be wrong because I would have predicted Gladstone still. Yorgos almost would have gotten in for been my winner for director, but Scorsese was still the better one. And Poor Things is easily my number 3 that year behind Killers and Past Lives. Now into the Zone of Interest from Jonathan Glazer, our other non-English film in this category. I forgot to mention, Past Lives is also technically a non-English film. Although it's an American production, it does have a lot more Korean in it than it does in English, by the way. But this one is our Best International Feature winner and also a winner for sound. And this was actually the UK's first win in the International Feature category by all means. Of course, made by Jonathan Glazer, who would do films like Sexy Beast, Birth, the Nicole Kidman movie, and Under the Skin. And obviously, this is, of course, a movie about a Nazi family in a house right next to Auschwitz. And then, obviously, one of the main Nazi soldiers, massive different positions for his job. But I'm going to put this in E. I just don't remember much of this movie. It's just kind of similar, I would say, to Minari, where it's just almost life, but obviously the life from a Nazi family, and there's just nothing else. There's barely any dialogue, so I have no idea why was it up for adapted screenplay. The performances don't really stand out. Sound design wasn't really a thing. The score, I can see why it wasn't up for there. Maybe the cinematography and just the production design, and that's it. Probably the production design alone. But having a pool right next to Auschwitz, that's just simply wrong, honestly. Obviously, we know why, but and obviously this is a fictional Holocaust story because all the characters are not real, of course, and this is, of course, based on a novel, of course. So yeah, I would not nominate this film for anything. It's just like nothing for me. It's just like not even Sexy Beast, which I saw like 2 weekends ago, and didn't even work for me either. So yeah, I haven't seen Under the Skin, so I'm not really sure how big I would be if I see that, if I'm a true not a fan of Jonathan Glazer or not. Yeah, for sound, can't really say because I've not seen, like I said, the creator of Mission Impossible. But for international feature, I would have gone with Germany's The Teacher's Lounge. Very odd because the Zone of Interest is set in Germany. And German filmmaker Wim Wenders had Perfect Days, but that was a Japan movie, so that's very odd. But yeah, The Teacher's Lounge would have been my pick in the international category. Okay, we are now into our final year of this century so far with 2024. 10 more films left, and we begin off with the picture winner of the year, Anora, which won almost everything it was up for. 4 of which, of course, went to Sean Baker, who became the second person after Walt Disney to win the most Oscars in one night, tying with him, of course, with 4, and the first person to win the most Oscars for the same film, for 4 specifically, as he won for picture, director, original screenplay, and film editing, something that Chloe Zhao did not be able to do, and Best Actress for Mikey Madison. The only category he did not win was supporting actor for Yuri Borisov, as he lost to Kieran Culkin in his lead performance in A Real Pain, which was not up for Best Picture. Anora is also the second film from Neon to win both the Palme d'Or and the Oscar for Best Picture for the same season, and of course the third film overall after Marty back in the 1950s. Anora was obviously the last movie I saw in the marathon, and it was a great conclusion, and I am actually going to give this one a B, but it will also be like Anatomy of a Fall, a very high B. Like with Emily Stone, as I mentioned with Poor Things, Mikey Madison did give the performance of the year as Annie. Easily deserving the Best Actress win. I know many people would say Demi Moore, but yeah, the Oscars made the right decision. Madison is the clear winner, even though she's like around my age. But yeah, she was the right choice to go with. And as ironically, I think I stated about this with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, if it wasn't for that, we would not have Sean Baker would have not casted Mikey Madison in this movie. So, yeah, the whole concept, I will start this up in saying the beginning portion of the movie kind of did start it a bit odd for me, because with all the whole sex scenes that Annie and Mark Eidelstein's character would have throughout the first portion of the movie up until when they get the marriage. But when the family members of Skorgov, Eidelstein's character, by the way, when they are found out that he's married, everything goes into massive chaotic shit. Especially once some of Skorgov's other people that is involved with his parents comes in to deal with the situation, and then this entire massive, almost stunt coordinator scene is just almost them fighting, like with Annie just combining with the 2 security guards and the main guy played by Karen Culkin, who is a Franklin actor in a lot of Sean Baker's movies. The intense scene of everything breaking in the house and Annie screaming. Like, that scene was so hilarious. I was laughing my ass off. And I think one of the funniest things I have seen, I was watching this on Hulu, and I had this in ads, and I think when Annie screamed something before, I think she was, obviously was muffled, I think when she said something, it then goes to an ad, and I was laughing hysterically. That was just a perfect placement, and then we see her obviously getting kind of muffled in some sort of scarf or something like that. And that scene alone, as well as the whole soundtrack and stuff like that, I'm kind of shocked the movie was not recognized for Best Sound, not even making the shortlist, because that would have made a lot of sense, especially for that scene. But then again, the editing also plays a key aspect in that. But I think the sound design really should be recognized for this movie as well as for the cinematography, which I'm surprised it didn't got in either. As for Yuri Borisov, he's fine. And obviously the connection with him and Annie, I kind of knew something was going to happen in the end, and I did kind of called it, and I wasn't really a fan of that ending. It just, I kind of knew what she was going to do with him. Like, you kind of knew it immediately after when they had their conversation nearing the end of the movie. Not in the car, but the scene before it. But yeah, I would probably say Eidelstein would actually be the recognition of the entirety of the supporting cast, with Culkin right behind him. And kind of similar to Dominic Sessa's parents in The Holdovers, Eidelstein's parents in Anora are also a piece of shit. especially his mother, but it's hilarious this time because obviously you can tell that Skargov is just a mama's boy. And that even makes him hilarious, especially in the divorce courtroom scene in Nevada. I know I kind of spoiled a bit of the movie, but a majority of the movie is just trying to find him. It's just Annie and the other three guys are just trying to find Skargavi throughout the entirety around New York. And I know many people are kind of thrown off with Madison's Brooklyn accent, but I don't really mind it, especially how more hilarious it gets in some of the conversations when she has to deal with Skargov's parents, especially his mother, of course. Of course, like his father kind of cares less. So yeah, Madison did deserve the win for Best Actress. I would also say Sean Baker gave the Best Script of the Year. It's definitely a deserving win for Original Screenplay. I wouldn't say I would have given all of it. Directing and picture, I think he would be number two for... Yeah, he would be my number two for director. But not number two for picture, though. But it would still be in, of course, regardless. But I would just only would have given the two wins for original screenplay and actress alone. Like, it did not need it to win almost everything. Like, if Your Barista did win supporting actor, then the Oscars would have been the Tony Awards, where they just love a movie that much, they go all in on it. As we have kind of seen with Everything Everywhere All at Once, Oppenheimer, obviously with Nora, and you can even technically say Coda because it won all three of its Oscars, of course, but that made a lot more sense. But it was not up for a lot of categories. But at least those three films did lost something. But it did kind of show that there have maybe been some personal bias voting and just voting for the same movie over and over again. But then again, starting next year, every Oscar voter has to watch everything that was nominated for, which obviously begs the question, why did it not start at the very beginning? So yeah, I did got this film on the Criterion Collection just not that long ago. So yeah, it definitely is a good conclusion. I would say it would be my second favorite. Third or... It's a toss-up between that and Coda for the second and third place position. Because obviously Everything Everywhere All at Once is the best winner in that. But definitely better than Oppenheimer and Nomadland. Next up is The Brutalist. Wow. Brady Corbet directed the hell out of this movie because he made this movie like an event. Like, almost like a never-before-seen movie from the 50s or 60s. Even though it's odd that I know that the epilogue is set in the 80s. But it almost feels like it's a lost movie about this. Obviously, it's a fictional Holocaust survivor immigrating to America to build this massive structure. I am going to give this one a B as well. Brady Corbet should have won Best Director, and I was really hoping he would have, because I do think this movie probably was number two for Best Picture and not Conclave, because with Brody winning Best Actor and winning Cinematography and Original Score, if Conclave did win Film Editing, I probably would have said it, but since The Brutalist only got two more wins than Conclave did, I guarantee it would have been more evident if it was number two if Corbet did win Best Director, and I think he should have. I'm glad he got some wins this season at Globes and BAFTAs, but I wish there was a lot more. Adrian Brody definitely did deserve the win for Best Actor here. Felicity Jones, oh my gosh, why didn't she not win Best Supporting Actress? I mean, her final scene alone basically explains, like, yeah, she's not in the first act, but when she comes in the second act, who obviously feels so supportive of her husband, and then something comes in and she really takes it seriously, especially in her final scene. And obviously with the character's health struggle she's dealing with, really just shows how much she really loves her husband, and then obviously how her husband really gets a little bit more time with his wife a little bit throughout most of this movie. Guy Pearce is pretty good as well, especially the massive twist that we'll come into later. I think this might be the Picture Nominee of the Year that you can't spoil, I believe. Or that or The Substance. I think it might, more so I would say on The Substance because of the specific genre it's going in. Although Pearce would have not been my vote for supporting actor. Definitely a great nomination in original screenplay. Yeah, the 3 hours, definitely worth it. It was fantastically paced well, especially having the idea of having this intermission, which for its digital and Blu-ray release, I believe it's like, 2 minutes or something like that, where if you were in the theater, it would have been like 30 minutes, I believe. But yeah, that would have been that's definitely a great break time of an intermission between where the movie ends in its first act and then where the movie begins in its first act. Obviously, the prologue and the epilogue scenes as well were great. Cinematography, it definitely deserved that win as well. The way how Lowell Crawley did that movie was spectacularly well done. The production design's really great, although that would not been my personal pick. Although it almost made it my personal lineup in the production design lineup, in specifically in my personal list in the awards expert app. So yeah, yeah, but this is definitely a massive epic movie that definitely would have made a lot of sense if it would have won Best Picture if Anora wasn't a big deal. Um, like another win for A24 though, but it was definitely a worthy experience. Next up into a complete unknown, which is easily the better music biopic of this decade so far, and I am giving this one. I'm gonna give this a B as well. No, no, no. I'm gonna give this. Yeah, yeah. It's gonna go in a B here. It obviously still does follow this typical music biopic format, but it is the best one I really enjoyed because the performances in this movie and the soundtrack is fantastic. I would have given this for best sound, honestly, and best supporting actor for Edward Norton. Chalamet also had a fantastic year with that and Dune Part Two. So yeah, he had a great year, and if I did would have chosen one of the two, it easily would be a complete unknown here. He did got a win at SAG, so I'm very happy he got a win this season. Monica Barbaro is pretty good, but I would have gone with Elle Fanning as the supporting actress candidate for that movie. Although she's the only one that doesn't do the music and obviously plays the typical love interest role, but it really is kind of more accurate, obviously, to the original source material, and her performance is fantastic. Yeah, I don't mind James Mangold's Best Director nomination, but it should have been for Ford versus Ferrari easily. And also, this would have been also my pick for Best Costume Design, oddly enough. Yeah, I think my favorite portion of the soundtracks probably would actually be Edward Norton's version of Pete Seeger's "We Moet," which obviously, of course, obviously with The Lion Sleeps Tonight, but obviously "We Moet," I believe that came first before The Lion Sleeps Tonight. So yeah, I don't mind his picture nomination. A little bit too much, I would say, like maybe not for director or adapted screenplay. Definitely the acting prizes and sound obviously makes sense. So it would have gotten a win for me somewhere if I was an Oscar voter. Now into Conclave, Edward Berger's follow-up to All Quiet on the Western Front, and a movie that actually was released around not say a bad timing, but the timing of when the movie came out, because of course, this past May we had the conclave that elected Pope Leo the 14th, and I already did a video prior to it of telling you who were all the members of the College of Cardinals that were voting in that conclave, which of course elected our first U.S. Pope, Pope Leo the 14th. So this movie obviously came back around, I think it was early November when it came out. Um, I think it's pretty good, and I am going to give this also a B as well. Now kind of going into, obviously I've been fond, a little bit interested in conclaves ever since I saw the two popes, and seeing how I've been having a fun interest in the College of Cardinals and seeing just who these members are and what would happen in a future conclave, or where do they get appointed to, whether it be another diocese or in one of the positions in the Vatican, and how close they would be close to the Holy Father, and who would become the next successor to St. Peter for those that are under the age of 80. And that's the case with this movie, of course. Kind of going into more of the things that you don't usually see. Obviously, this is not the first time we have seen a conclave portrayed, not just with the two popes, but even the new. Is it the new Pope, which is the sequel to the miniseries The Young Pope from HBO? But obviously, you get to see the other aspects other than the voting aspects, like where the apartments they stay at, and with the massive secrets they were going into, and then we find out who gets elected. Yeah, I would say, this is the movie that you can't spoil because you do not know who is the one that gets Pope. Because obviously it's kind of like a vacant secret, like it is in real life. And then all the secret exposures of what happened to the previous Pope. And because I was expecting the controversy would be regarding about sex abuse, but that's not it. I can't really reveal what the massive, not really controversy was, although radical right-wing media and Catholics might be offensive. Not the one near the end, but the one before it. I'm specifically talking about the massive exposure from the Camerlengo, and it's not sexual abuse by all means. Um, so, like, that's the one thing that I think kind of really is the one that is the major spoiler of the movie, and not the one who gets elected. Because, yeah, so that was kind of an interesting twist. So I would give it credit to, I would say first to Peter Strawn, who wrote the film, but also the original author, who was actually not Catholic, but brought a unique way that really kind of brings up a lot of discussions about still trying to modernize the Catholic Church into the real world and understand that times have changed. Ray Fiennes is pretty good here as the lead. There is only one person that does stand on the supporting cast that is not Isabella Rossellini, who doesn't do much in the movie. I can't say which of one of the supporting actors I'm talking about here, unless if you saw my personal lineup, you might know who it is, because the person I would mention would be the MVP of the supporting cast would be a spoiler. So I can't say which one it is, whether it be if it's the one who gets the Pope or the one who gets the exposure, or is it the Camerlengo. I can't really say which one it is. The adapted screenplay win is fine. It's just that it's not really a go-to movie for me. I think it may be because the darkness of the lighting that this movie comes in, like how, I'm specifically with the shaders and the lighting through the cinematography, which I can see why it did not get in for cinematography. So yeah. Would it be in Best Picture for me? Not really. It just would be a little bit far out, but I still do enjoy this movie. Next up, Dune Part 2, a movie that should have had performed better than most other films. And it ended up becoming the Two Towers of this year, so Part 3 is going to be The Return of the King, ladies and gentlemen. Going to win all the Oscars going to be up for, and Denis Villeneuve is going to finally win director. But that would depend on how the reception of the critics goes, unless if it's a major downgrade. But Dune Part 2, oh my gosh, S tier. This almost made it into my into the double S tier. I will explain why it almost prevented it becoming a masterpiece. It almost did. It was like a 9.5 out of 10 or something like that, or 95%. So almost a perfect 10 out of 10. But yeah, easily a massive improvement to the first film. One of the best sequels I have seen probably since Mad Max Fury Road, I would say. This was a unique experience, seeing Paul going from where he was to now roaming in the desert with all these other people, and the relationship he would have with Zendaya's character, and how he would rule the kingdom, of course. Well, specifically understanding of how to try to take down, obviously, the original kingdom and all the leaders and stuff like that. It's just really well done. Denis Villeneuve should have been in for Best Director again. I can't believe he was overlooked this season. I'm glad BAFTA got him the nomination. I'm glad he got that makeup nomination at BAFTA. Really a shame the movie got overlooked. And the reason why the movie did is because the excuse would say, oh, it came out too early. And the only reason why the movie came out too early that year was because it was the most infamous movie that got pushed back due to the strikes. Because with the writers and especially the actors on strikes, Dune Part 2 had to be pushed, and obviously, I think it was the Oscar Buzz podcast that did a what-if scenario of Dune Part 2 was not pushed. Dune Part 2 would have done better at the Oscars. Unfortunately, it would have taken Past Lives' spot for Best Picture, unfortunately, because they were not going to let go of Maestro for some reason. But, yeah. It is a shame, but Dune Part 2 still took home sound and visual effects still. Definitely great wins for sound and visual effects, of course, even though I've not seen a lot of the other visual effects nominees, but definitely sound for sure. Should have won Best Production Design, should have been up for editing, makeup and hairstyling, costume design. I have no idea why Hans Zimmer wasn't eligible for original score. Cinematography, definitely I'm glad for the nomination. It should have been up for adapted screenplay and director, and even the performances. Like, obviously for me, Zendaya should have been recognized in Best Supporting Actress, especially the year she had with that, and Challengers. Challengers, of course, being what many people consider the best movie that year that got 0 Oscar nominations. One thing to note about with Zendaya's character is something that I completely forgot when I was watching Dune Part 2, is that I completely forgot she was barely in the first film. And not also that is a massive credit to her performance, but that's also a credit to Villeneuve and John Spates' writing on that. To almost completely forgot to tell you that she was barely in the first movie, and obviously she plays massively bigger more in part two. And that's really a massive credit to what Villeneuve and Spates did of making that character still memorable, even though she was not in much in the first film. So that is a massive credit to him. Yeah, this should have won Best Picture. It should have got a lot more nominations. And if Dune Part 3 ended up becoming better, if it is a true masterpiece, or if it ends up being a massive downgrade compared to the first two, then the Academy is going to be looking stupid on why they really underperformed the film at the Oscars and only giving it 4. That's right? 4? No, 5 Oscar nominations, excuse me. Yeah, production design, sound, visual effects, cinematography, yeah, 5 nominations. Like, that's just ridiculous. Because the movie that many people think should have not gotten so much nominations, Amelia Paris, the Netflix Oscar bait French movie. So, basically all I will say is Netflix, don't try to be Harvey Weinstein. Because this, like, I said this in a comment on a live stream, and I think the person who was in that live stream said that this would have been a movie Weinstein would have backed up, because it has all the Oscar baity things. It's a non-English film, it's a musical, it has a diverse cast, and it stars a transgender actress. And obviously it's pretty historic with Carlos Sevilla Gascon becoming the first transgender actor to be nominated. And obviously the biggest backlash, not just for the general audience who hate the movie, but also for the radical right-wing media as well. I'm going to be honest, in the minority on this one. I actually did like Amelia Perez. I will admit it is going to be in B, but it will be a very, very low B. Like another B minus that almost got into C. Yes, the first few minutes were very off for me, especially with Zoe Saldana's character. I mean, her eyebrows alone just basically kind of explains in one of the close-ups of her face. That just basically kind of explains it. It was so confusing throughout the first few minutes that I even understand more of the opening of Moulin Rouge than Amelia Perez. But when we get to Amelia finally being transitioned as the woman we know, that's when the movie starts to get better, from being what was a gang leader to now becoming a woman who wants to help find the deceased members of these bodies. And that definitely seems like a great idea in concept. It's just, I think the biggest problem with me, I think the most, this movie should have not been a musical. That's the biggest gripe, I think, with the movie, is that this should have not been a musical. If this was not a musical, I think this movie would have done better. Probably, like, not more cringe levelist, but at least a better movie. I mean, Gascon, I will admit, is pretty good, but Selena Gomez was also pretty good as well, but Zaldana, no, I would not have given her the win for Best Supporting Actress. My personal pick, as I said, would have been Felicity Jones. And for the original songs, I think the only one that worked well in context were both Papa and Selena Gomez's song Mi Camino. Those were the only two songs that worked well, great in context. Those are the only two good songs in the movie. And the climax was a little bit odd, especially the ending. But this movie definitely should have not been a musical. That's the biggest gripe I have the most with Amelia Perez. With Amelia Perez getting 13 nominations, it obviously he only won 2. It was expected to probably win like 3 if it wasn't up with another film in the Best International Feature category that was also up for Best Picture. And what I would say is probably our most surprising Best Picture nominee in recent years, I would say, and of this decade so far, the Brazilian film I'm Still Here from Walter Salles, the guy behind Central Station and The Motorcycle Diaries. So, yeah, obviously, if you, when I was doing these award show prediction videos throughout last year, there was just so many people commenting on the support of I'm Still Here. And, like, you can tell how many Brazilians were massively, hugely supported with this film. They're going to try it again next year with this upcoming season. I believe, what's it called? The Secret Agent or something like that? We'll see how that goes. But yeah, this is the first primarily Brazilian movie. I know there was The Kiss of the Spider-Woman back in the 80s, but that was a collaboration between Brazil and the US. This is the first primarily Brazilian movie to receive a Best Picture nomination. And it did beat Amelia Perez in the Best International Feature category, and its only other nomination that was Best Actress for Fernanda Torres. I'm also going to give this a B, but it would actually be another low B, kind of on the veins with both Conclave and Amelia Perez. I'm Still Here is actually my least favorite of the 10 Best Picture nominees. Sorry, folks. So I kind of do prefer Amelia Perez a little bit better, but it is still a pretty good movie, especially going into an aspect during the Cold War, specifically the military dictatorship in Brazil at the time, and of the questionable doubt of the kidnapping of Eunice Piava's husband with the massive disappearance, and she and her entire family being overlooked by massive security from like either police forces or some of the military personnel, and just like the life that's struggling on, and she really wants to demand justice of her husband's disappearance. Yeah, Fernanda Torres is pretty good, but she doesn't make it in my personal best actress lineup. Sorry. It would still make it in my personal international feature lineup if you do not combine all the animated documentary categories, but it would just be a little bit lower than Amelia Paris in my personal pick in that category of The Seed of the Sacred Fig, which would have been my personal pick in the international feature category. So, yeah, is it insane that it got that Best Picture nomination? Yeah, unexpectedly, and I still remember that. But it's very interesting. I put that number 15 for the potential nomination for Best Picture above challengers Nosferatu and a couple of other films. Like because September 5 and A Real Pain didn't make it, and like Nickel Boys and Sing Sing were also in the consideration for those slots, and then I'm Still Here kind of jumped all of them and then got in that Picture nominee. So yeah, I'm not really as massive fan, so sorry all the Brazilians. I do like it and I would get it on Blu-ray, but it's just I won't go back to it as much. Speaking of Nickel Boys, let's go into that from Ramel Ross. This was, of course, my first film of the Picture nominees to watch in this specific order because it was the least likely to win because it only had the One and Done nomination, which was adapted screenplay like Women Talking and Past Lives, which Past Lives was on the original side. Despite of only getting in the screenplay nomination, other than Best Picture, I really was blown away by this movie as well, and I am gonna give this an S. This movie, wow, the way how Ramel Ross directed and wrote this film with Jocelyn Barnes, uh, just really made a massive improvement because I actually did watch one of Ramel's previous movies. Even though this is his first narrative film, he has made documentaries in the past. Most notably, Hale County This Morning, This Evening, which was nominated for documentary feature back in 2018. And like, there was nothing in that movie specifically. And obviously, yeah, I think on his first narrative film, this was definitely a massive surprise for me, and especially going into an aspect during the Jim Crow laws eras and the Nickel Academy in Florida, of course, obviously, because, of course, as you know, Florida is a very big populated red state, especially nowadays. I already talked about that in Selma, and how Ron DeSantis is basically the George Wallace, but it's Florida. But definitely going into a real having a fictional story, which is based on a Pulitzer Prize winning novel from I think it was 2019 it was published, of a real event, of having a fictional characters in a real event, just showing the innocence of some young African American boys that were accused of something, because obviously our main nickel boy that we follow, which is Wood, played by Ethan Harris, like just shows the innocence of the character because obviously of what happens, and but then his connection with his fellow nickel, Turner, played by Bradford Wilson, they just became an iconic friendship duo throughout this movie, and definitely one of the best movie duos of that year, of course. Right up there next to when we get to Wicked, of course. Anjanette Ellis Taylor as Elwood's mother is fantastic in her scenes, but obviously the one thing that really obviously captivates the movie, of course, the most is the POV cinematography. I mean, how the hell this was not up for cinematography, but Amelia Paris did? That just makes no sense. Not even Maria, I would say, because it is like one of the most creative decisions for cinematography, and that also really makes the direction also stand out of having this idea, having in two different perspectives, and the fact that you have almost a scene that is repeated a couple of times, I think like one or two, of the two different perspectives of each of one of the boys when they finally meet each other in camp is pretty unique, I would say. And then obviously when we see the future Elwood in like a future scene, kind of almost similar to like I would say the scene that's played by Daveed Diggs, by the way. It's almost kind of reminded me about the future scenes in After Sun, where in a couple of scenes later in portion, we get a future version of our main character and where that person is now. So that kind of almost kind of remind me of that. But I think that had done a bit of better job, especially with the whole investigation of the our main characters looking back at the Nickel Academy and how it was done nowadays and how it was found. But yeah, the POV shooting was just fantastic. Ramel Ross definitely would have been a great Best Director nomination. Although he almost made my list, but I think the cinematography just kind of pushed it over more so for his direction. But the writing is fantastic, and it would have been my pick for Best Adapted Screenplay over Conclave. Although Dune Part 2 would have been my winner personally in a personal lineup. But yeah, Anjanou Ellis Taylor definitely should have got recognition for Best Supporting Actress. She did got a Critics' Choice nomination, but that was it. But yeah, this movie really should have got a lot more recognition as it did. It does feel like, yeah, at a glance, it might feel like an Oscar bait movie if it wins like a big massive prize. If a novel wins a big massive Pulitzer Prize winning or something like that. I think The Goldfinch is a prime example of that failed to. But I think this one did turn out better, and it really worked out for me on the day when I was watching it because I was going through a massive migraine, and that really helped me get a lot better. Next up, our latest horror film in the Best Picture lineup to date, and the first Best Picture nomination for Mubi, as they are kind of now trying to get into the awards traction race as well. The Substance. So obviously, I've heard, of course, obviously last year, I've heard a little bit about this movie when it came out of Cannes. But then, of course, many people had been seeing a little bit more of the movie because of Demi Moore's performance. And then throughout October and November, people were talking about it. Even Moist Critical even talked about this movie in his own YouTube channel. And that's just insane. That even somebody who has a bit of a divisive fan base, or divisive, who is one of the more divisive YouTubers in the platform, even talked about this movie and just how insane the movie is. And I can see why. Yeah, easily this is also going in B as well. I kind of almost thought where the movie was going to be going, but I did not know how the execution-wise. This is yeah, I would say this is the movie that... Okay, no, I said Conclave, but that or The Substance are the two movies you can't really spoil. But Conclave is probably an obvious answer of, like, who got the Pope. I think The Substance probably is now more so, now turning back onto The Substance, because... Oh, gosh. So yeah, Demi Moore. Now let's get into the obviously big massive discussion about the movie, and that is obviously regarding the performance by Demi Moore. I'm gonna be honest, I do like it, but I wouldn't nominate her. I prefer Margaret Qualley, who plays obviously the younger version of what would be the of Elizabeth Sparkle, and she is clearly more of a standout. And okay, I'm gonna go a little spoiler here, but she is one of the best horror villains I have seen. Like, one of the more creative villains, I think, ever. Just because she wants to keep the young and beauty. That's something Elizabeth didn't really want to do. But when Sue becomes her own personality, that's when things really go into a massive fruition. Dennis Quaid is fine. It's an interesting casting choice because I think it was supposed to be Ray Liotta before he passed away. So that was a very interesting move, and I think Dennis Quaid probably was the best replacement for it. Obviously, the shrimp scene alone kind of makes sense for the sound nomination, but it obviously I can understand why it didn't get in for sound. Oh, but the ending, oh my gosh, I can't really go much into that portion, of course, but I will say I had trouble sleeping the night after when I saw this movie. I couldn't really sleep that well. At least with Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, it did make me sleep. Yeah, I wouldn't... It is a good movie, but I wouldn't consider it... Not because of... I'm not really big on horror and stuff like that. It's just that there was a lot of other movies that were better than, obviously, than some of the other films on this list. Not on this tier list, but from that year specifically, like The Wild Robot, or Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Must Foul, or, some of the documentaries. Like, looking at my awards expert app, it's actually at number 15 if you count all the movies from 2024 that I've seen. So yeah, it's like, I do, obviously I have the Blu-ray, of course. It's just that I just don't want to go back into the ending because I might have trouble sleeping again. Unless if I saw it in the morning hours, then maybe I might forget it, but oh gosh, I just couldn't stop thinking about what I saw the ending. Yeah, the makeup I can understand that, but I wouldn't give it the. I would I personally would have give the win to the. Well, I can't say because I've not seen A Different Man. So yeah, it's just yeah, I wouldn't even nominate for makeup. Like it might even be like a shortlist candidate, but not a nomination wise. If you've seen my awards expert lineup. Ladies and gentlemen, we are finally here with our final Best Picture nominee of the century so far, and alphabetically, Wicked by John M. Chu. This one, I was the most skeptical when I was coming into this film because I know a couple of my friends are massive Wicked nuts, and I've seen a couple of their Instagram stories going nuts for this film. And obviously, I know I'm obviously fond with the song One Short Day, which was my number one in the Macy's Parade Rank the Songs video on 2003. So I am fond notably about that number. But obviously, this is a person who has still to this day never watched The Wizard of Oz. Yep, I have not watched the original 1939 film. Probably I will after when Wicked for Good comes out, and probably even watch Oz the Great and Powerful and Return to Oz, probably in a specific timeline order. That would be very interesting. With all the Wizard of Oz theatrical movies that have been released. Yeah, I was very, very skeptical of coming into this movie, but I did end up taking to this movie really well, and I am going to give this an A. It was going to be probably planned an S, but I decided on A because I will say the first few minutes were kind of a bit odd, mainly specifically Galinda kind of being very awkward, in my opinion. But as obviously everyone says, once the dance scene comes in, that's when you can understand now more the impact for Galinda's character. And obviously in this movie, and I would say also what is the first act of the musical, because For Good is going to be Act Two, the sympathetic side of Elphaba, and Cynthia Erivo, I like a fantastic performance as Elphaba. She really nailed that performance so well, of just not also making that character so memorable, but also obviously her creative singing, of course, but um some of the songs are actually pretty good and how they were doing well. Although I would say the One Short Day number, which was my favorite, well, even though I've not listened to the actual soundtrack, but obviously the song I'm familiar with in the Macy Parade, just didn't work well execution wise in the movie, especially having both not just the like the little was it Manian show or something like that in between, but even having both the original stars, Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel, in it, just I would say kind of a pointless cameo, I would say. It's just like that was a fan service cameo without a doubt. That was not necessary. Like, okay, maybe like as in the background, but not for something like that. Or have that be before the number or something like that. And then we can enter into that song. But oh well. But and obviously where the massive twist comes in, where Elphaba would become, how she would become, even though we will find out when I will see Wicked for Good. Obviously, if it does get in for Best Picture next season, we'll just see how it goes. Now, I do agree with some of the nominations. Now, obviously, first up, Ariana Grande is leading. I don't understand why she was campaign supporting. That's a dumb move by Universal. But I do prefer Erivo over Grande. John M. Chu did a great job directing, but he did not. And actually, he almost made my personal best director list. He's actually my number 6. I definitely do agree with the win for best costume design. I would have. Well, right now it would be my leader for makeup and hairstyling, but then again, I've yet to see A Different Man. But costume design definitely deserving that win. Um, there are a couple of other categories it could have not really gotten in that was not necessary. Like, okay, sound I can understand, but visual effects I can understand with the monkeys. But yeah, John M. Chu would have made a better nomination for directing than Jacques Audiard or James Mangold, by the way. But yeah, yeah, Wicked. I obviously also got the Blu-ray not that long ago, so yeah, I was very surprised by the movie. It is my third favorite of the picture nominees, behind Nickel Boys and Dune Part 2. So yeah, what a great movie it was. So, there you have it. That is all of the Best Picture nominees at the Oscars of the 21st century so far. Looking at this lineup, out of 191 films, it looks like the one that got the most was easily the B level. Um, so like we have obviously one for the double F tier. We got four for F. 29 in the E tier. 25 in the D tier. And 19 in the C tier. So there were like 78 movies. I kind of thought it was either just okay, not good, boring, or pissed me off, or absolute shit, like Extremely Loud, Incredibly Close. 43 in the B tier, so that's like a lot. And then you've got 32 in the A tier, and then 30 in the S tier, and then the 8 masterpieces in the double S tier, and that's 113. So yeah, 113 out of 191 films I ended up enjoying, 78 I didn't really care for. So that's kind of showing a little bit more of the positivity side than much of the negativity side, but it does show that there are a couple of slackers in some of the picture lineups. And as you could see, in 2024 was the only year in the Picture Nominees that I ended up liking all of 10 of them. Even Amelia Perez, by all means, but not like on a very high B level, but a very low B level, I would say. So yeah, so basically, the positivity kind of takes the mark, and I have seen 8 of the greatest movies of the century that all deserved that Best Picture nomination. Lost in Translation, The Artist, 12 Years a Slave, Whiplash, La La Land, The Shape of Water, Killers of the Flower Moon, and Past Lives. So, that actually kind of wraps up the tier list in the Best Picture lineup, specifically of all the nominated movies and winners, of course. So if you're new to the channel, you can hit that subscribe button, and you can go into the link in the description below of create your own tier list if you have seen all of these picture nominees or a couple of certain films of the century so far. Thank you guys for watching. We'll probably do another, like, more of these tier lists in the future, like for all the other non-Best Picture top 8 movies, and then all the animated feature nominees, all the international feature nominees, and all the documentary feature nominees of the century so far as well, from 2000 to 2025. So whenever I complete one of those, we'll get into one of them. I think the next one would be the non-Best Pictures in the top 8, but that might be for a while. So that's it. Bye for now.